I'd like to call to order the City Council meeting of February 19th, and we will also be acting as the Housing Authority. If you would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And if we could please have a moment to remember Paracel Carol Bauer is her name, and on a happier note, we are thankful for all the rain that we've had. We've been praying for it for years. You get what you ask for, right? Every once in a while. We just weren't we should have been a little quantitative on our request, but anyway, we got more than we know what to do with. And of course, with that, we did have a lot of damage, but everybody's been working really hard and taking care of things. But I also am thankful that everybody was safe, nobody was injured during all this time. Public Works, all the guys out there, the Conservancy, everybody who's been out there working. So glad everybody's safe. And if we could please have the roll call.
Councilmember Albers?
Here.
Councilmember Olson?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Cassidy?
Here.
Mayor Marshall?
Here?
I'd like to announce that Richard Hernandez won't be in attendance.
Right.
Correct. He has an excused absence this evening.
Okay, thank you. And we have a presentation this evening.
We do. We have Jonathan Foster here from Davis Farr, our certified accountant, and he will give us a report out on the fiscal year 16-17.
Honorable Mayor, Council, I appreciate the opportunity to present. Can you hear me okay? All right, there we go. Present the audited financial statements for the fiscal year 2017. My name is Jonathan Foster. I'm audit partner with Davis Farr. For your audit, I was the field manager. So I just wanted to start with the reports we issued. As part of the basic financial statements, we issue opinion, which is included in the report. We also issue a letter of agreed upon procedures over your appropriations limit. We issue a report on internal control over financial reporting, which I'll speak a little bit about later. And we also issue a letter of the summary of audit results addressed to the board at the council. As part of our audit, we issued a modified opinion on the financial statements. That was due to the hospital's auditors issuing a modified opinion. That was due to the pharmacy not including their financial information as part of the hospital. So in our opinion, you'll see a paragraph where we qualify our opinion, and it's not due to the city, it's due to the hospital. So some areas of audit focus in fiscal year 16-17. We reviewed your pension obligations for miscellaneous and safety. We reviewed the actuarial reports and assisted in preparation of the journal entries, as well as your other post-employment benefits, otherwise known as OPEB. We performed a review of capital assets. We tested material additions and made sure they were properly classified in the financial statements. We confirmed your long-term debt with external parties and made sure they were recorded correctly. We did testing over your successor agency compliance, did a review of expenditures in accordance with your recognized obligation payment schedule, and also compliance with the loan between the city and the successor agency. And lastly, we performed a review of your internal controls. So one of the letters you received was a report on internal controls. We issued 2 comments as part of that letter. The first comment was due to audit adjustments and prior period restatements. As part of the audit, we had quite a few adjustments, 31 in total. We also issued a second comment regarding management functions and internal controls. We noted that management reviews and controls that are usually in place were not being performed timely, or in some cases at all, prior to year end. And just to touch upon some of the changes you'll see in the financial statements from year over year. part of your balance sheet, let's go back to assets. So you'll notice from the prior year, your capital assets increased substantially. That's mainly due to capital asset additions, your artificial turf project, and your fuel dock replacement project were your largest projects for the year. And you'll also notice on the very bottom, your deferred outflows, pension related. That's due from the actuarial results directly from CalPERS. So the results of their valuation resulted in an increase in that line and not due directly to actions from the city. On the liability side of things, this year you'll see a new liability, and that is due to your Pebbly Beach landfill. You are required to recognize a liability for future landfill closure cost. So you'll see under non-current liabilities, landfill closure obligation in the amount of $3.9 million. That's new for the year. And again, you'll see an increase in pension-related deferred inflows, and again, it's the result of the CalPERS actuarial valuation. I wanted to mention budget to actual for the general fund. You'll see revenues. There weren't any surprises. Revenues came in slightly over budget, which is a positive variance. And overall, your expenditures came in below budget. A few line items came at over budget. That were your fire and ambulance and your capital expenditures. However, the city made up for it and coming under budget in a few other line items. Those were your community service and special department. So ending net position for the general fund is approximately $7 million. That's a slight decrease of the prior year from $2.6 million. And you'll see in fund balance what your components of fund balance are. You have $3.6 million in your unassigned fund balance. And then you'll see non-spendable fund balance. So I just wanted to touch upon what that non-spendable means. When you have items that are part of equity that are not easily convertible into cash, those are recognized in the non-spendable portion, so the city does not have access to that cash as of year-end. If the council has any questions at this time.
Council?
No?
Councilmember Albers?
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay. All right. So is there comments from the audience? Okay. I want to thank you, and I guess we are to receive and approve the audit.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. No further questions? Call for the vote. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
4 ayes, 1 absent. Hernandez.
Okay, announcements and written communications, City Manager.
We have one written communication this evening. It has to do with item number 11 on the agenda, and that has been placed before you on the dais if you didn't have time to see your emails. I wanted to make sure the public is aware that it is vehicle season, and that is from February 6th to April 1st, and the hours are from 9 a.m. to 12, and then from 2 to 4, Monday through Friday. And happy to report, and Bob Greenlaw might be stealing his thunder, but all 95 units of our trash cans are on their way. We hope to have them by the end of next week, and hopefully they'll be in place by mid-March.
Great. Awesome. That is good.
Yeah, that's good news.
Okay, department head reports. Who'd like to step up to the bat?
Walking to the podium.
Thank you, Amanda. They were waiting for ladies first.
Miss under here, what you said? I'll go first. Mine's short. We've got 2 of our 4 projects have gotten close to getting their doors open. Bonds is open, and the Trailhead is going to be coming up close behind them. We're working with the Trailhead to finish up a couple of things, and they should be getting their certificate of occupancy in the near future. Zane Gray is doing color coat on both exterior structures, the original Pueblo and the new structure in the rear, and they're working on framing on the new lobby building. So that's where they're going to be concentrating most of their efforts going forward. Atwater is finishing up demolition of the restaurant area. They had put that towards the end of the schedule, so that is what their current focus is on. And we had a really good call last week with Moffitt and Nickel, myself, with the Coastal Commission. It went really well. They were really positive about helping us move forward in determining what our next steps are going to be and how to lay out a game plan for getting our full LCP ultimately updated. So that call went really well. And that's all I have, unless you have a question.
Council? No. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Obviously, with the weather and stuff that we had a lot of silt and stuff in the bay. It's played havoc with our patrol boats getting up to the strainers and stuff, but we fared a lot better than some of the other things that happened. So unless you have any specific questions, we're good in the harbor.
Council?
How's the gas stock coming?
I'm sorry?
The gas stock.
It's waiting for the permits and stuff through the County Department of Public Works, and we're moving forward as much as we can.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Captain John Hawking, LA County Sheriff's Department. I'd just like to talk real quickly about domestic violence. This week, we had 3 separate domestic violence incidents where we were forced to arrest one of the 2 parties. And the law says for domestic violence, if one person hits another person and police officers arrive, they have to arrest the dominant aggressor. So that means whichever one was the most violent. So we have no say-so in it. It doesn't matter if the victim, whether it's male or female, doesn't want the other person arrested. The law says we have to make an arrest to stop the problem. So if you're involved in a relationship and you're in an argument with that person, you need to either get out of that situation right then and calm down, cool off, let both parties cool off. Whatever you do, do not hit the other person. It's only a matter of time before we respond out there and then we make the arrest.
Right.
Everything else is going well with the Sheriff's Department. Does anybody have any questions?
Now, how are you doing coming with your dispatcher?
Dispatcher is going well. We have one dispatcher that's going to be retiring in March, and we have somebody that is interested in the position.
Okay.
They came over and got a tour of the island, got a tour of the station, and it looks real good. She has about, don't hold me to this, 7-8 years on the department. Okay. She's a dispatcher at a busy station on the mainland, so I think she'll be a real good fit over here if she's the one that comes.
Right.
But
Okay.
It's not confirmed
So it
yet.
looks like you, but it looks
Yes,
like
it looks good.
good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. No questions? Okay.
Good evening, Mike Krug, Fire Chief. I just wanted to briefly thank the Public Works Department. The bulk of the responses for the fire department this week involved weather and the flooding, and the Public Works had the bulk of the load to shoulder. And when we arrived on scene, they had the situation well in hand, and once we established there weren't people missing or injuries or structures that were severely impacted, our job became just supporting them, and they did a terrific job. Unless you have questions for me regarding that or anything else?
No?
Thank you very much.
Bob Greenlaw, Director of Public Works. Got five different reports. First one, of course, the storm-related events. At 11:30 on February 13th, after significant rainfall, a series of events occurred that required major responses from Public Works, which in turn were further supported from, like Mike said, other city departments, including fire, community services, admin, and LA County Sheriff. Additionally, community-wide support assisted in getting help from Jordahl Construction, Connolly Pacific, the Island Company, Fine Line, and also CRR. First, the high rain inflows impacted the city sanitary sewer system and surcharged the gravity interceptor at the Pebbly Beach Road. The gravity interceptor starts at the end of the first force main, which is at the first gate there, the northerly gate, and there's a manhole there where that starts. And it continues on to the Pebbly Beach Road lift station where the second force main starts after the lift station. Flow is elevated to what would produce 1.2 million gallons a day, and that's the plant capacity. Usually this time of year, the flows are at 350,000 gallons per day. So you can see that that rain event had some what is called I&I, infiltration and inflow, and what our concern would be that inflow. And that inflow, we anticipate that where that came from was in the area of Pebbly Beach Road. Because the way that we operate the other place for our inflows, and I'm not talking about the infiltration where we have leaks in the pipes, but actually where we take on stormwater in drains. And we have our own low flow system here that we actually take all of our storm drainage before it goes to the harbor and put that into our sanitary sewer system for the first flush. So on a storm like that, it would be for the first half hour, and then what ES would do would turn off that system so we don't send the flows through the Catherine lift station further on. So those increased flows have to be coming from somewhere. And ES has been out there identifying through smoke testing that there's some areas around Pebbly Beach, that lift station out there, that there is definitely some inflows that could be happening because they saw smoke once they put that smoke testing in there. So the result of this, the gravity interceptor became surcharged and released sanitary sewer overflow during the rain event, which was much diluted during that rain event, but it did indeed happen around that area, especially around that manhole, around that gate. So second, what was additional pressure on the system, or just bad luck, one of the interim fittings that we had there failed in the lift station. So this resulted in the need to bypass the normal pumps with a standby pump. And of course, like we have that redundant pump out there. And so that handled that, and it can handle that flow up to that rate. So and with quick reactions from ES and Jeffrey Hernandez, they got that bypass pump operating before we did have a sanitary sewer overflow right at the lift station. But it did occur on the gravity interceptor once it got surcharged. So let's see. So that's a second event that happened, and then we were working on that, and then in the middle of the night as we were working on that, we got a call from dispatch after 5 inches of rain or so, and they said that there was a slide in the area of the pet cemetery, and once that we did get personnel out there, it was not just a slide, it was a major event, as the whole town realizes now, that we had, where we activated a mud flow, and that mud flow followed, basically our floodplain and all the way down to the harbor, down Wrigley, Clemente, Beacon, and Clarissa. So I have Jeffrey Hernandez here, and I'm going to turn it over to him for this moment right now, just to give you a few more details on what had happened and his perspective on that.
Great, thank you, Bob.
Jeffrey Hernandez, Public Works Lead. We initially responded to the sewer lift station at 10 o'clock p.m. Throughout the night, I had assigned 2 Public Works guys to maintain Pebbly Beach Road open for emergency access.
Jeffrey, talk into the mic if you would, please.
Can you hear me now? Sorry. We assigned 2 personnels, 2 Public Works guys to maintain Pebbly Beach Road open and accessible to emergency personnels. At the same time, fire department drove up the upper road and mentioned that there was some slides on the upper road. So Public Works was also addressing upper sections of Wrigley Road at the same time. A call came in 4:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. Pet Cemetery mudslide. Sent the 2 Public Works guys with equipment out there, and I got a call back saying, "Hey, it looks like a movie scene." Mm-hmm. We went and started closing roads, assigned personnel to each corner of the streets. We closed Clarissa, Lower Clarissa, Beacon, and Clemente, and we started diverting traffic that needed to go to Edison through Catalina, through Front Street. We had personnel in every corner to make sure that there was people that had to go to work to Edison and not people just wandering around. Code enforcement helped out. We did have Jordal, people from Conley Pacific offering to go get their equipment. I had Jordal, Conley Pacific, Avalon Environmental brought their equipment from the dump. SCI maintenance guys helping us out. So there was multiple companies and personnel, people just on the streets pushing mud and stuff like that. So once upon we figured out that the drains were completely clogged and there was no way of unclogging those right away, we started by pushing material into our bay and removing it to the side. We started breaking it down in zones, cleaning Lower Clarissa for emergency purposes, Beacon, and then we went to Clemente and then Wrigley Road. By that time, we were moving vehicles off the side of the streets from Clarissa and Beacon and Clemente to Descanso or Upper Clarissa to be able to do a proper clean. Also inspecting properties, making sure that there was no major damage or flooding inside, with the fire department also helping out. Most of the cleaning was done by heavy equipment, and we just did what we could just to stabilize the area. Once the area was stabilized and water was going back into the channel, Public Works started doing full clean, starting with trying to unclog the drains. Lower Clarissa, we unclogged those and then started doing washdowns. The average hours that Public Works put in per day was about 14 to 15 hours, just continuous. And that's still continuing right now. So as of right now, those zones that were highly impacted are not clean. Now we're working on Joe Machado, the road up there and the drainage channels, and then we'll be hitting terraces, Middle Terrace and Upper Terrace, and then a proper clean will be done afterwards. And then inspection of all drains were done yesterday and today, and we've still got some to address. I want to thank all the businesses that helped out by giving food and helping out with shovels and stuff like that and telling us what they see. And other than that, you guys have any questions I can answer?
No, other than just thank you. Thank you so much for everything you all did.
Thank you.
I don't know if the council is aware that Jeffrey was the only one that was on island that evening. So when I first got the call, then the second call, and poor Bob Greenlaw had to be over town to give a presentation to the water boards. He was beside himself that he wasn't here.
Yeah, it was, and I was trying to deal with it from there, but, all I could do was just give advice to Jeffrey and then make a few phone calls so we could get other resources going. But, yeah, Jeffrey stood tall for the community and stepped in where he needed to be. So I congratulate him for that. So, of course, in our first response is always to stabilize, and that's what you've seen. Stabilize and we clean up. Now you'll see that more detailed cleaning, and then it gets down to the repairs. And I think you've all probably been out to Pebbly Beach Road, and you've seen our protective fencing. It is not in very good shape. Each one of those panels are $1,000. And then the effort to clean with that significant amount of debris behind it. And it's at such now that we're going to be needing some outside help to be able to get that done in a timely fashion. So we'll be putting together some numbers and approaching you with that. And then also on Casino Way, those were two significant slip outs there that were pretty tall up there, and I think that we're going to have to probably put some K-rail to protect, especially over there by the yacht club, as we're seeing some additional rock falls there. So we may have to extend some short pieces of K-rail and fencing in those areas too. So we're taking a good look at that. So besides that, just mainly getting the cleanup and making sure that we're ready for the next storm. Right. So next item I have is recycling and trash receptacles. 95 units have been confirmed for delivery to the island during the week of March 1st. So that'll finally come, and we'll get those rolled out, and starting with the waterfront, and maybe go out in a few different phases as we get, because right now I think we have less than 200. So this is going to be more than we have right now because it's 95 times 2. So we'll be able to put those most everywhere, as we explained when we presented that item to you when we did purchase those. The stair lift, the city received one bid from 101 Mobility for $31,885, so that was a good bid. And the contractor's real excited about getting going, and we're contract execution underway. So I think we finally are on the way to getting that one done. That is good news. The ADA curb ramps, again, that's another CDBG project, and that contract execution is underway, and that work's going to get going in March. And of course, that's the intersection where everybody's wondering what else is going to be done in that Beacon and Sumner intersection around Vaughn's, and also that Catalina and Beacon intersection. That's where those ramps are going to be built. That helps finish that project and make sense of that intersection. The mobile office for the wastewater treatment plant, remember this one's been a while here. We had to go get a permit from the Coastal Commission because that's outside of the area that we actually have our own coastal development plan. Eventually, after applying for the permit, they said it's waived. And so, we went through all of that, and so now we're able to install that. And remember that the reason that we're installing that mobile office was that PARSAC came out and evaluated our facilities, and ES has 5 staff members in that office, and behind them are very large electric, so all the electric panels that operate that whole wastewater treatment plant are also in that office, and they're sitting less than 3 feet from those. So they said, this is to be safety compliant today's standards, we needed them not to have that in that space. So that's why in the interim, before we get a major remodel of the building done, we were going to put a temporary office space toward the outside of the building there, so that we're ready to get, that's on the island and ready to set as we speak. Okay, and then another good news item. I represented the city along with Ryan Barron, the city attorney's office, and Daniel Apt, our city stormwater consultant, at the Los Angeles Regional Water Quality Control Board meeting on February 14th. So that's where I was the night when this happened, and I had to be there that morning to be at that meeting. That was for the renewal of the city's National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, the NPDES permit. So that permit covers our sanitary sewer and stormwater sewers, and our CDO was based on violations of this permit. Okay, so the good news is we received a 7-0 approval to renew the permit for 5 more years. And they also reduced some of the conditions on that permit when they did that. The staff really worked well with this. Additionally, the board shared that they were very impressed with the effort that Avalon made since the CDO. They sent their thanks to the mayor, the council, and to the community. They said that we were a model of how it should be done, and how a regulatory agency and a community can come together to arrive at a winning solution. So it was, I was shocked when I was, especially after going with that SSO that night before. And I did report, I said, we're still having problems with our Pebbley Beach lift station. So, I was reporting that as I was making my presentation. It didn't faze them. They still were very congratulatory of, and seeing the marks and the data, what it showed of where we were 2012 and then where we are now. They said, they were trying to really probe into the details. What can you share with us, to make it so that we can share this with other communities that are having these problems? And they were very impressed with the amount of investment that we had made. When we totaled all that up, it was significant. So any questions?
I have a couple of.
Please.
Okay, so the mobile office, can we get an update on what that is additionally going to cost the city? Because what we had agreed to as far as costs associated with a certain size of a building, and then of course we got the bigger building because it made more sense financially, but now it's my understanding that we're going to have a significant increase in expense due to the crane that it's going to take.
That's true, and we'll total that up and get a report on what that is. Okay, and okay. I guess after we got before we even got it here, we realized that we couldn't get it turned around that corner. Okay, so, and the building was already purchased at that point. So, and we'll share that with you. And, okay. We just need to get that report together, and we'll share that with you.
Okay.
We did think that there was somebody in town that was going to be able to share the cost of the crane being shipped over, but then they didn't need it, so now it's all on us.
Yeah, and with the permitting, yes. There's a lot of things, and we'll report on that of how everything rolled out and what we could do better the next time.
Okay. My second question is, do you have any update on the specific email about the sludge that I reported on Dump Road?
No, I need to investigate that further. Right now, I'm talking to Jay Fowler, so we'll make sure, I have anecdotal information from others in the community, but I need to investigate that to give you a full report that is accurate at this point.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah, and so that's what, I want to make sure that we dig into it.
Okay.
And I dig into it with Jay, and then we come up with the right report for you.
Okay. And then my last question is regarding the Pebbly Beach lift station. You had mentioned that there was a failure of a part. I guess based on the email that I had sent for a follow-up, what do we need to do as a city council to get that lift station fixed once and for all?
So you've already authorized us to be able, you've already approved the plans. We already have plans. We already have construction documents. It has been advertised this last Friday. I'm also going 2 different methods, trying to make sure that we do get a contractor on board at the soonest possible time. One method is the standard method of going out to bid. The other method is going through a mass contract that we're part of Sourcewell. So trying to bring those to council and say, this is the result of that, so that we don't end up in the same situation with the stair lift and go, no bid.
Right.
Okay, and so that, and I want to get the contractor on board as soon as possible, at least to get the pipe in the ground. So that's why the contract actually has additives in it. If it is too expensive for them to do the concrete, and they're just a pipe contractor, specialist, we don't want to pay, $1,000 a yard for concrete if we don't have to. We can do that through another contract if we have to. The main thing is to get the pipe in the ground, get the station fixed. All the other stuff can be done with an efficient way of doing it, So,
okay, so
I'd like to do it all in one contract and get a contractor to get it all done.
Okay.
But I also realize I don't want to spend, exorbitant amount of money on getting the repairs done. So I'm trying to balance those 2 things
Fair.
whenever I'm trying to put a project out. And I realize that we do need to get that project done.
Okay, fair enough. From this perspective, we look at the high level, and of course we get into details for specific items, but in my mind, we've authorized those repairs, we've made budget adjustments, we've done all these things, and then we're still having failures. So explaining that we haven't actually gotten to the point of doing that project yet, that's what our community wants to hear, is that it's underway, it's happening, but we haven't done it. So my questions that I was getting is, didn't you guys already spend money on this? Didn't you do this? Why are we having this? And that's my point of what I'm trying to get at.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
Cindy, can I respond to you on the whatever, you sent me a picture of some stuff that was on the road by the landfill. I had spoke to Jay Fowler this morning, and they do put out the swaddles, and they do testing during a certain amount of rain that comes. They're required to do testing. It does come across that lot area, but the video that you said was attached, there wasn't a video, so I need to know how far was it actually that stuff that was running all the way down and around?
Yes.
Okay.
So whether it started from the dump or whether it started from the storage yards in front, I was physically inside the storage yards. That's where those videos and the pictures are taken, was inside those storage yards in front. As you're driving out Dump Road, there's a couple storage yard or fenced-in yards is what I'm saying. So that's where I physically was standing taking photos. And then it runs all the way down Dump Road, all the way around the corner, all the way past Sunlight Auto, and all the way down into the water. Into the water.
Okay. I would like to see the video, because I know there will be leaching of the organic materials from the landfill. So,
okay,
if you'll resend that, because there was no pictures at all.
Sure.
Matt Baker, speaking on behalf of Finance. I'm going to keep it real short since I'll be providing a mid-year budget update later tonight. Just wanted to let you know that we have closed our fiscal year 17 as we've completed the audit, and right now finance is working to prepare for the 18 audit, which we're hoping to start with Davis Farr in March.
Great.
Unless there's any other questions, that's all
Nope.
I have.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council, city staff. Just a few updates from the Recreation Department. Butter lettuce, bok choy, golden beets, blood beets, carrots, basil, and more. Some of the things that went in the ground this past weekend, Sunday and Monday, for the community garden. We had over the 2 days, we had 8 to 10 community members involved with the planting, and 6 to 8 weeks, we hope to see some of that first harvest.
Great.
We are also taking registrations for a mini dance, tumbling, and ninja program. It's a 4-week program coinciding with a program that's going on right now. Signups have been taken this week, and then with the first day being on Saturday. Youth basketball signups are open for all categories still through this week. Tryouts are March 2nd, Saturday, March 2nd. Our financial workshop is this weekend, Saturday and Sunday here in council chambers. 1 to 2:30 is a session, and then a half-hour break, and then from 3 to 4:30. We've got flyers here in the office, but both Saturday and Sunday, things like how to increase cash flow, debt management, proper protection, building wealth are all things that will be discussed. There are free workbooks for the first 20 people that do come in for that. And then lastly, the Homeless Task Force met last week. We met for about an hour, just our initial discussions, kind of broken up into some short-term and some long-term goals. Mainly talked about some short-term things like being able to get showers, being able to get tokens for laundry, things we can help provide for our community that are homeless. And then steps on inclement weather, things we can do along those lines. So we'll report back a little more formally. We'll get together again in the next couple of weeks as we kind of hash out some of the things we discussed, but we'll be back in front of council in a couple of weeks with a little more information on that.
And I've talked to you briefly about it, but what can we do in the interim, because all of those terrible nights of rain, and you had talked about, well, maybe we could tap into CDBG. I don't know if we could rent a hotel room. I don't know how we get those quick answers, because I think we're supposed to have rain again on Thursday. And we're just, I'm worried about the here and
yeah. So I've been tasked with some of those. Like I said, we're going to meet in the next couple of weeks. At this point, Avalon Community Church is providing some services to get people out of the weather.
Okay.
So if you contact Scott directly, he's doing everything he can, and we might just be able to help with that, with some of the things that he needs, like blankets and cots and those types of things. So there's a little bit of a program in place. We need to kind of further that, and then just help get the word out in regards to it.
Okay, I appreciate it. It's just,
Anything else?
Anything else? Okay,
Thank
good. All right. City manager report.
I just wanted to report that during our event that was happening with the rain and the rocks and the tree limbs and everything else, that the Office of Emergency Management had been contacted, and we also had reached out to Supervisor Hahn's office, and throughout that day and the next day we must have heard 5 more times from different county agencies. What can we do to help you? If you need anything, we'll assist in any way we can. If you needed more resources, they were ready to send them. So
Great.
The county is very receptive to us.
Okay. Well, City Attorney probably doesn't have a report. It's nice to have you here, Elizabeth, though. Thank you very much.
Pleasure to be here.
Okay. And council member reports.
I don't have anything tonight.
I don't have anything. Just want to thank everybody for all the hard work they put in.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I have a couple. Going on with what Councilmember Olson was saying, a thank you to everyone for helping out during the storms. I would like to also do a shout out, because I didn't specifically hear, for the Island Company and for the Conservancy. One of those slides prevented the ability to go up the Summit Road into the interior. The Island Company also worked tirelessly to help get that road open. And then also for the Conservancy for opening up the Garden to Sky Road to be able to allow residents that live in the interior to be able to go home. So thank you for everybody's efforts. Also, the Island Company with the Pet Cemetery, we came by late in the evening and there was just all kinds of stuff going on and lots of crew working to try to mitigate what was happening there. So shout out to them, and also a shout out to Johnny Q, John Kornstrom, who rescued all sorts of stranded individuals from Sol Vista that early Thursday morning, got some teachers to school, got employees where they needed to go. So thank you for being a great citizen, and I'm sure there was others. I did want to say that in walking around town several times that day, there were two particular incidences that I was really a little bit bummed about. One of those was, obviously, we were in a state of emergency, so to speak, and the Crescent Street was being opened. The roads were open for sort of emergency personnel in that regard. And there was one of the boats attempted to come over. It was a miserable experience for most people on the boat. We had all kinds of first responders out responding to people who were trying to get off the boat, who were just very unhappy. And there were people in golf carts just sitting on Front Street, and the Sheriff's Department couldn't get by. It was just sort of, not really paying a lot of attention. And then there was another time a couple hours later down near the corner of Crescent and Clarissa, and there was just a group of people in a golf cart looky-looing around, and they got stuck in the middle of all the sludge, and it created an imposition for all the workers trying to clear the roads. So just want to put out there, in a state of emergency, if we could all just take caution on where we should be during those times, and if you don't need to be somewhere, let the emergency responders do their job and let the crews get out there and clean it up. I also wanted to congratulate Avalon Goes, Mr. Sean, and all the participants and cast, and one of our fellow council members. What an amazing, I've seen lots of clips. Unfortunately, I missed the play, but it's my understanding Into the Woods was very successful, and huge shout out to Mr. Sean for everything he does for this community. And lastly, I want to report there's a couple of flyers on the over here, on the table over here. LA County is coming over next week to do a mental health first aid training for adults, recognition for adults. There will be a youth mental health first aid training coming possibly in April. It's happening over 2 days, next week, Tuesday, Wednesday. There are still spots open. It's free, and I would like to encourage anybody who has any interest to please attend this. It is free, and it's well worth the experience. And I attended the Gateway Cities Council of Government meeting, and that's all I have.
And you're not going to tell me that you're going on a wonderful vacation?
Oh, and I should report that, shouldn't I? I will miss my very first council meetings in 5 years. I'm going to miss the next 2 council meetings. I will be traveling out of the country. So I wish everybody well.
Thank you. And I'm not going to report anything this evening. Thank you. Oral communications. This is an opportunity for people in the community to speak on items that are not on the agenda. You will be limited to 3 minutes and no action will be taken. Hi, Paul.
It's me again. Hello, Paul Bertrall, Avalon Library. I'll say this about the rain. The rain is fabulous for libraries. Everybody wants to come into the library, and rightfully so. It's been a wonderful couple weeks for us. We've had a lot of great activities. We had Christopher T. Magician about a week or 2 ago. We had like 60 people, 60 kids. We were bursting onto the street. It was fantastic. Coming up next week, I'm going to have a visit from MakeMo. Coming up actually tomorrow. Going to make mazes. We're going to take Kiva planks and make mazes, architectural design, that sort of thing. On Thursday, we're going to have a visit from Native American storyteller Ben Hale. He's going to tell stories of Navajo legends and folklore. That's going to be 4 o'clock on Thursday. We're also cross-promoting because the Friends of Avalon Library are going to start their ukulele class Thursday at 4 as well. That's going to be, they'll tell you more in a minute, I'm sure. It's going to be in the upstairs at the bank. That's coming up. Let's see. Next month, I'm going to be bringing over a one-man play that's going to be a storytelling of the Odyssey. That's going to be mid-March. I'm also going to be starting something called the Parent-Child Workshop, which is a series of play dates, basically, where you clear the floor, put toys out, allow moms, dads, caregivers, and their toddler children to sort of bond. I'm mentioning it here because I'm going to be looking for resource individuals, people who know about nutrition or child health care or medicine, to come in and maybe just talk a little, walk amongst the kids, and give advice to parents on child care issues. That's part of what Parent-Child Workshop's all about. Every county library does it. We're going to start doing it too. There are challenges here because I don't want to have to bring people over from over town. So I'd like to use resource specialists from here. So hello out there. Come and approach me if you have anything.
And what is the age of that?
It should be about 0 to 3.
Oh, okay.
Very young. It's a very young program.
Okay.
For young parents, young caregivers, and very young children.
Okay, great.
Other than that, thank you very much. The library's always open for you guys.
Thank you so much, and it's wonderful. I know there's a few people that want to stand up, so let's get to the mic.
Madam Mayor, were you?
Yes, you were looking like you wanted to get up a second ago.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and ladies and jelly beans, gentlemen. My name is Rhett Fair. I'm 66 years of age almost. I will get my 6th residency card this year, and I'm a sailor. And the reason I came to speak tonight is concerning our moorage fees in the harbor. This time last year...
If I could interrupt you, and I'm sorry to do that, Rhett.
Yes?
That is an agenda item, so if you can save your comments to when that agenda item is on.
Thank you for sharing that with me.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Good evening. Allison Osinski, 356 Sumner. I'll just follow up from Paul. The ukulele program looks like it's going to be a hit. We have more than 30 people signed up already. So if you haven't signed up, come on and join us 4 to 6 Thursday afternoon upstairs at the bank.
Correct.
Okay. I mainly wanted to ask today about what happened to the Harbor Oversight Committee. At the last meeting, it kind of got blown off a little bit, and there was some direction to a gentleman to set up a meeting with boaters, but nobody gave him any direction on how to do this. There was no site, there was no time, there was no location, there was no way to meet. How was he going to contact the boaters? Didn't give him any help really in putting this together. And I don't want to see this just disappear like another one of these harbor projects. So I'm just asking that you readdress that issue, and let's do something to actually get a meeting set up. Next, any decision on selling propane at the fuel dock for this summer? It was, again, something that was discussed, and there was no decision about it. The boaters are going to need propane, and they're going to have to get it from somewhere, and they can't just exchange tanks. That doesn't work on boats. And my usual, has there been any meeting with the Island Company and/or Los Angeles County to discuss obtaining land and/or finances for the pool and recreation complex projects? I'd just like you to please don't forget it. Another year is going by and nothing's happening. Thank you.
Thank you. On the, do we want to chat about that oversight thing just for a moment?
Is that for the harbor thing?
Yes.
I have spoken to Greg Harris twice, and with his schedule and my schedule, we are meeting on Friday morning. And we are establishing how to proceed forward, and I was going to assist him doing that and to help him put an ad in the paper. And
okay.
So yes.
Okay, great. And on the propane, is that, because that was a concern that I had, and I don't know that it wasn't resolved, but we were, go ahead, Harbor Master.
As for the propane at the fuel dock, we're not set up to fuel it. I'm talking with the fire chief. That's not even in the possibilities of being able to do that. And two, regarding the exchange of tanks, that's, like Allison says, there's so many different tanks out there. So the propane at the fuel dock is pretty much a dead item. That will not happen. We don't have enough facilities to make that happen. And not to mention all the laws and stuff that govern that particular site. So I don't see that happening at all.
Has anybody reached out to AmeriGas?
I'm sorry?
Has anybody reached out to the LPG provider now, the guy that provides the swap out tanks? To find out
At a Pebbly?
Yeah, if they got any different size tanks.
I mean, we can exchange tanks. It's just there's so many different types of tanks on these sailboats and stuff. It's something that we can look into. But in talking with the fire chief,
No, not for us to do it, but for Pebble Beach to get different size tanks.
Ole, I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Pebble Beach gets the different size tanks, so they can go exchange tanks out at Pebble Beach.
They can for barbecues, regular 5-gallon tanks. I'm not sure at the building supplies they do that.
The question for the building supplies: can they get the smaller tanks?
I don't know.
So I think that would be nice if we could do the reach out and then report back and say what other options might there be.
Okay. Not a problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor, City Council, and staff, and thank you for your service to all of us here in Avalon. And we really appreciate it. But there's one issue I'd like to revisit here. There were times in the past years when the city clerk has been appointed by our Avalon City Council to the interim city manager job due to the departure of the city manager. Last time this happened was on December 19th, 2017, after the departure of city manager David Jenkins. Interim status in a transitional environment is necessary and appropriate at times to keep our government running and is recognized in the Avalon City Code. Later, at the June 19, 2018 City Council meeting, City Clerk Denise Ratty submitted closed session item number 2, public employee appointment, title City Manager. Ultimately, I understand that this is when Ms. Ratty concurrently became City Clerk and City Manager. Our City Code clearly recognizes and forms a distinction between the duties of our City Clerk and our City Manager for good reason. Combining the two jobs creates a lack of checks and balances, producing potential conflicts of interest by one person holding the two most important jobs in our city's civil service. A few small cities in California have, for their own reasons, codified a combined city clerk, city manager position, but did it in transparency and have oversight regarding conflicts of interest. In the last city council meeting, a council member suggested that the council oversight the hiring process of the assistant city manager. It was openly shot down as micromanaging. It was very disappointing. So now ethical oversight is considered micromanaging. I don't go with that. I can't. Why did Ms. Ratty not immediately and publicly embrace the oversight offered by a wise council member? Why was there resistance from another council member and silence ultimately from the city clerk? Our city clerk's job is to ensure that the city managers and city council's decision-making process for the city is 1, transparent to the public, 2, complies with federal, state, and local regulations, and 3, is properly recorded. Why did the city clerk from the beginning not point out to the city council that combining the two jobs could pose a conflict of interest in the city's checks and balances, and maybe some oversight would be forthcoming? Why did the city clerk not publicly post and advertise the city manager job so that the city council could have a wide range of candidate options? Why now is the city clerk, city manager, who is already deep in qualified staff interviewing candidates for the unnecessary and redundant job of assistant city manager at an additional annual cost of up to $174,000? I'll finish here quickly. The city clerk, city manager, already is in the $300,000 annual earning range, making more than the governor of the state of California. On record here last month, she made it clear that she was asking even more pay from the city of Avalon, now that she holds down 2 jobs. If the city manager, city clerk can't do both jobs without an assistant city manager, then she might consider resigning from one of the 2 jobs. In the future, chances are that the city clerk, city manager will be seeking more taxes from us for important projects like hospital, parks, harbor, and more. After this kind of irresponsible spending from our city's treasury, she will certainly lack credibility in her appeal to the people. This kind of spending and waste is a poor example of leadership for our younger generations of leaders in this town to witness in a city already running a very lean budget. Thank you very much.
Okay. Would you like to hand that over to us?
Say again, please.
Okay, would you like to hand over that document for us?
Which document is that?
The one you just read?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just notes.
No, I know. Well,
I'll get some copies. I'll submit it to you. And
pretty thorough.
We'll go from there.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
In fact, I might get a record from the clerk, and then you can have a hard copy of that as well. That'd be more official. These
Okay.
notes. But I'll give you both.
Okay. Thank you. No one else? Okay, then we will go to the consent calendar.
When do we get to address this?
Did you want to talk?
Yeah, I do. At what point do we get to address this? I mean, this is like public comment. Anybody can come up here and say whatever they want. Anybody can trash somebody, and it's not right. It's not truthful information that's being given out.
That's why I thought it would be nice to get the
we-
document. So then if we want to...
At what point are we going to address this? We have a staff member that we should be protecting too, and what's being said is not totally truthful.
Can I ask the council member Cassidy, how much democracy are you going to allow me? Or is that exclusive to you?
You have the right to speak, and you've had
Thank you.
your right to speak several times. I totally agree to that. I'm
Thank you.
saying, at what point does the city council step in, and at what point can we answer? Because we're not supposed to talk during public comments, but at some point, we should be defending our city manager, and should be defending the decisions that we make from accusations that aren't always correct.
Thank you. Try then starting back in June when there was no transparency, and it was basically done behind closed door session. And none of the code issues were discussed, possible conflicts there, none of this. That's when, not now. I am just, as a citizen, bringing this up.
Don't engage. Okay.
But I do appreciate you letting me practice
And
some
that
democracy.
is why
Thank you.
I've asked for the documents.
Okay, fair, fair.
Okay. Now we're back to the...
Lisa's gotta
Oh,
go
I'm
in.
sorry, Lisa.
Yeah.
Actually has something wholly different that's way more lighthearted and truthful. The Kite Festival was really fun. Thank you.
Yeah.
Public Works for hosting it. We had a great time. There were a few dozen families up there, and everyone got to run around and have a good time. So I just wanted to say thank you.
I understand when the adults came on, the wind kind of died. Yeah. Jim, did you have any announcements? Okay. Hope you had a nice little mini vacation. Yeah. Okay, consent calendar.
There are 9 items this evening on the consent calendar. The first one is actions from February 5th, the regular city council meeting. The second one is warrants for a total disbursement of $834,387.81. Number 3 is to adopt an ordinance of the Avalon Municipal Code pertaining to accessory dwelling units. Number 4 is adopting an ordinance repealing and amending 3 sections of the code pertaining to density bonus units. Number 5 is to authorize staff, bless you, Annie, to go out for a classification and compensation study as required by the City of Avalon's personnel rules and regulations. Number 6 is twofold, and that is to approve a 4-month extension for on-call city engineering services and to authorize the city manager to execute that amendment. Number 2 of that recommended action is to authorize the city manager to solicit competitive bids for the city's on-call city engineering services. Number 7 is to authorize the city manager to execute a 2-year amendment with Transportation Concepts for the operation of the city's public transportation system. Number 8 is also twofold, and the first part is to authorize staff to contract with Davis Farr for professional services to audit fiscal year 18 for a not-to-exceed amount of $42,400. Second part of that is to authorize staff to solicit requests for proposals for a firm to provide audit services for 3 years, which would be fiscal year 19, fiscal year 2020, and fiscal year 2021. Number 9 is to adopt a resolution making the appropriate findings to declare a local state of emergency due to the damages from our severe rain event last week.
Council, what's your pleasure?
I'd ask to pull items 5 and 6.
Okay.
And 9, please. 5, 6, and 9 for me.
Move staff on 1 to 4, 7, 8.
Good job.
I'll second.
Okay. Item number 5. Oh, we have to vote. I'm sorry. Call for the vote.
4 ayes, 1 absent. Hernandez.
Item number 5 is a suggestion by staff that that they be authorized to solicit requests for proposals for a firm to conduct a classification and compensation study, where effectively the person reviews all of the tasks that people are performing, makes sure that our job descriptions are appropriate, looks at our classifications within those, and pay rate, grades, and so forth, and then compares them. I believe my recollection is to a number of cities which we've agreed with our labor groups are representative or comparable to Avalon. Is that correct?
I believe Councilmember Albers, last time they came to us, they go out and they look at all the cities that are very similar to ours, maybe in size and things that they manage, like because of our landfill and the wastewater treatment plant are contracted out, but other cities have them. And they come back with a recommendation of the cities, and I believe all those things kept coming back with staff determining, yes, those were appropriate.
Because I remember that there was quite a lot of back and forth with the labor groups and the city council and management in terms of which cities were designated as those being comparable and those which really might not be.
Correct.
So, okay. Well,
And it was many months process to getting through it, the time they started it and finished it.
right, and I think the feeling was that we didn't want to be doing it every time we brought in a new consultant to do the work, that once we had the cities, those cities were not going to change dramatically, and that we should just stick with the same. It seems like reinventing the wheel. So
I know when Koff and Associates came in last time, they were given our previous ones, so they were able to do comparables.
So I just had 2 comments about this. One, I'm noticing that a lot of other cities are including more information to just classification, specifically the staffing levels, so that you're getting a per capita comparison of essentially how many employees you have per capita, and the budgeted cost of the services in terms of the salaries and benefits. So I'd like to see that we include that. And then the other thing, I'm just kind of curious, because it says that we do this every 5 years, and we did this in 2015.
That was
so
my
it just seems
question.
like we're kind of jumping the gun, given everything else that's on the city's plate.
And this is just as part of the negotiations that were underway, that we were going to go forward with at least going out for requests for proposals, so we knew what we were dealing with, and we want to be sure that we can budget for it in our next fiscal year, so we can have it done by the appropriate time of 2020. So fiscal year would be 1920.
I'm sorry, so the project doesn't begin until October 20th, and that takes 5 or 6 months to do, or something crazy. Now you're already at July 1, 2020. You know, kind of that quick, and that's when it has to be done by July.
Right. Well, but what this is proposing is the RFP is going to be released a year from now.
No, it'll be released in a couple days.
I mean,
a couple of weeks.
The work will be done a year from now.
Right.
Sorry. Okay.
Right.
That was my concern with it as well, is we're a year before it's due. So I just, wondered if that was the most appropriate use of city staff time right now while we're...
Well, how would you change it? Assuming, I hear what you're both saying, but assuming it takes this kind of time, how would you change the timeline to get us to that July 1 date, 2020?
Well, I think the question was just answered. Staff wants to be able to budget in the upcoming fiscal year.
Yeah.
So that's...
That kind of answers.
So going out now means that they'll know how much to put in for the budget. So I guess that makes sense to me now.
Well, the RFP should be pretty simple. I mean, we have
Yeah, it's
boilerplate.
attached.
Yeah, it's done.
Essentially, it's
Yeah,
attached. So
it's done.
I'm just asking that it includes some aspect of comparing the staffing levels in
In
various
comparable
departments
cities.
with the cities that you're comparing to.
Okay, yeah, good. That as well.
That's a fair request. I agree.
Also, just not going to cities, but going to departments like other people running sewer plants and other people running harbors and stuff, so you get a better cross spectrum.
Okay.
Oh, like a private...
Or no,
Other agencies?
Other agencies.
Other public agencies.
Other public agencies.
Or utilities. Yeah.
Utilities.
Okay, all right, with that direction.
With those amendments, I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Okay, move in second. Comments? Call for the vote.
4 ayes, 1 absent. Hernandez?
And number 6, this is our engineering services. We've been working well with ESG, I understand, and it seems like we have a lot of ongoing things that they're well aware of. I was just going to recommend that you wait until January to do this RFP. It
Okay,
seemed like
we
there's
just-
a lot going on, and to extend it for 4 months, I don't think that there's any evidence that they're not giving us good value for
We
what
really-
we have them. I would just suggest
Yeah.
you wait until January.
We really like them, but I'm just trying to, it's
And I get that, and I
been 3
appreciate
years,
that.
so we're just kind of
Right.
checking in,
But
and if that's
There's some
our
real
desire.
benefit to continuity
Uh-huh.
with all of the different engineering things that we have going on. So I would amend this to say that we're going to extend their contract through January 1st, or December 31st, whatever.
So that, something like that
Okay.
sounds fine with me.
Okay, all right, well, so moved.
Second.
Okay. Comments? Call for the vote.
4 ayes, 1 absent. Hernandez?
And I pulled number 9. Number 9 is requesting that we adopt a resolution making the appropriate findings and declare a local state of emergency due to the damages from severe rain and winds to the city of Avalon. So I really just pulled this so that you could give kind of a quick couple sentences. What does this do for the city? Why would we do this? We're beyond the event. And if you can share how it would be helpful for us to give an affirmative vote on this.
Okay, so like I said, we stabilized everything, so that's part of it. And so, there could be some future funding that comes with that. But also, we're doing actions to go and make some repairs right now. So, well, like I said, on Pebbly Beach Road, and each one of those fence panels are $1,000, and then cleaning that up, and then using resources that are beyond just city staff. And so I'm putting those together to ask, but also you have additional environmental permitting that helps you out during a state of emergency. And so, not that we want to bypass but we also want to make it as easy as possible to do the things that we need to do that are reasonable for an agency to do. So that helps us. And that being said, also, LA County has reached out to us. Potentially, this could come if there, at least in my career, what happens is maybe this one rain event does not make a state disaster, but the next 2, as we have incremental, and it starts exacerbating, the conditions on the mainland as well as here. So from there, this could lead to a state disaster, and we want to set ourselves up for, at least for that category A or B under the Natural Disaster Assistance Act of the state. Not saying I was going to get to a federally declared disaster yet, but those are the things that could get us for that kind of general cleaning up, emergency response stuff, okay? And so that's what we were doing, and that helps us do those few things.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Better your words than mine, so thank you. With that, I'll make a motion to approve and adopt the resolution.
Second.
Call for the vote.
4 ayes, 1 absent. Hernandez?
Item number 10.
I will say that I have attended 2 of the businesses and chamber members that have attended. I know a couple of us were there. The first one, and yesterday we had another one that was a pretty lengthy meeting. They were, overall, I thought they were pleased with the ordinance that legal had drafted for us. They had a few other items, but I'll let them take it over from there, and Mr. Hunke.
Great, thank you. As you're aware, Senate Bill 946 was approved in September of 2018, which prohibits cities from prohibiting sidewalk vendors, but provides authority to enact laws which promote the public health, safety, and general welfare of its citizens as long as they're consistent with the bill. At your January 15th meeting, City Council passed a resolution with some interim regulations for sidewalk vending. Prior to today, we had not received any inquiries. We've just only received inquiries regards to formal applications, but no applications themselves. As of today, we received 5 applications regarding sidewalk vending here in Avalon. Tonight before you is a proposed ordinance to assist in further regulating sidewalk and roaming vending. The ordinance was prepared by BB&K Council and further assists and regulates some of these following areas. 1, prohibiting sidewalk vending in residential areas. 2, provides for 20 feet in distance for fire-related access. 3, it regulates hours of vending. What's being proposed is 8 a.m. to 1 hour prior to dusk. 4, it limits the total number of vending we have in the city. At this time, what's being proposed is 12 vendors, 6 on Front Street, one on each of the parks, as the parks are relatively small, and then 2 roaming vendors for beach access. Number 5, it provides for a 20-foot distance from all entrances to buildings. Number 6, it discusses, we need to discuss whether or not live scan background checks need to be involved in this. There are some concerns that we don't do it for some of our other businesses, but it's something that's on the table to address for tonight. Number 7, we have 6. We have either, right now it shows a 6-month permit process. We've gone back and forth between 6 months and 12 months, so that's something that needs to be established. We do have in the staff report a consideration for a 6-month evaluation period to bring it back after council after a 6-month period to kind of just test the waters and see where we're at that point. And then this ordinance at this point doesn't address, one thing I think we need to discuss is it doesn't address how many permits an individual can take out. We're going to limit it to 12. We have had an applicant at this point take out 3, or suggesting to take out 3, and something that the ordinance doesn't address. So I think tonight you'll find that we've got some public comment here, quite a bit of public comment, and we might want to hear that before we get into some further discussion about it.
We can. And Steve Haves is already lined up. Thank you, Dan.
Good evening, Council. Steve Haves, 353 Las Lomas. So I'm here tonight and really representing the large portion of the business community, as well as probably even a larger portion of the citizens in town that I've spoken to. I know you guys, this Senate bill has been brought upon the city. This was not the city's doing, and you guys need to react and find a way to somewhat control it. So I will say, and that you guys have done a really good job so far with the current ordinance as it stands to control what could have been really a pretty devastating thing for our community, as far as just an amount that we couldn't control. And everybody here knows probably how many problems that would bring to this community. We'd probably face a lot of initial problems. There'd be secondary problems and long-term problems as well. In This ordinance, though, it still allows for, as Dan said, up to 12 vending permits, 6 within Front Street, 2 at least roaming on a beach, and 1 within a park for a total of 12 within the city. Today I went down with code enforcement and measured out areas based on this and found at least 6 to probably fit within all the different measurements that have been brought in by the within our ordinance. And there's a lot in here. There's up to 25 different types of, I would say, restrictions or guidelines to length, distance from each vendor, to flower beds and fire hydrants and everything else that you possibly can think of. But I believe that 6 on Front Street or more is really too many. Our town has, for as long as we've been incorporated, has denied applicants to vend on Front Street or sell things, and for good reason. I really believe that it was for safety, it was for overcrowding, it was to enjoy the natural beauty. I remember when I was 15 years old, I actually had a little ice cream cart up at the Memorial Garden. I came to the council when I think Denise's dad was the mayor, Bud Smith. And they said, great idea, great entrepreneurship, but sorry, we don't do that. And I think that has been consistent. So I think what I would like to try and offer is maybe a solution. I know that you guys have guidelines to follow, and there's only so much you can do. But there is a line here that I will read that says, SB 946 allows a city to restrict sidewalk vending to prevent an undue concentration of commercial activity that unreasonably interferes with the scenic and natural character of the areas. Also, to ensure that there's regulations directly attain to health, safety, and welfare concerns, which I think the ordinance was really written on health, safety, and welfare concerns. But to me, that first sentence, I believe that if you go down and the 6 areas that we identified today, if you put a vending cart, which really at this point, there's no control over color, what it looks like. I know there's size regulations. And you put them in those 6 spots and you're walking down Front Street and looking out the harbor, it is clearly obstructing the natural beauty of this town. People are going to look at that and, it's just, so I believe that within that line that's something that we can maybe address. Secondly, the overcrowding and undue concentration. Imagine, 12 vendors down, 6 on Front Street, 2 on the beach on all of our busy days. It is an undue concentration that will cause a lot of problem. I mean, this is really a code enforcement nightmare, to say the least. So there is language in other cities' ordinance. I have the city of LA, among other ones, and one in their ordinance, they actually did restrict certain areas. Staples Center, Dodger Stadium, Hollywood Walk, several things like that were really concentrated venues of, somewhat like ours. I would say Hollywood Walk is equal. And they took a 500 range radius and said there's no vending within 500 feet. Now I know their precedent was mostly on the safety of cars coming in and out, and like Dodger Stadium's only when there's activities, but Hollywood Walk is 365 days out of the year. There also is language in our own ordinance and in the thing that we look at 500 feet for other areas such as hospitals, schools, things of that nature. So I think that it would be reasonable to add to this that a 500-foot distance from the mall to the casino on Front Street, that there'd be no vending allowed. What that would do is that would actually push it back enough that it would be in other places in town. I'm not against the vending necessarily. There's probably a place for it up in the canyon or different places but down on Front Street, I mean, I just is the wrong place for it. And I believe that that with that language that we could probably carve something out that would. And I know the comment was, well, we'd probably get challenged, but I have to tell you, our ordinance that we wrote, there is things in there that are very challengeable. So why not we just put it in there? There is some precedents. I mean, it's not like we're all of a sudden saying, let's just, not do it on Front Street we have before. We have a precedent of a history of this island not to do it. Plus, I think some really good language that would. Now, I'm not an attorney. I don't know. I know things are challengeable, but that would be my suggestion, that we look at something like that.
I appreciate your comments. Yeah, thank you.
I don't think there is anything.
Other comments by other folks? Do you want us to just open it up for our little discussion here first, and then if anybody else... Oh, I'm sorry.
Like he's mentioning, Avalon never accepted street vending, but I do think it adds, like when we have the art festival down there, no one's like, hey, we can't see the harbor. I think it also adds culture and a little bit more tradition. There's if you look at our breakfast spots, there's only 2 places where you can get breakfast. I actually think Steve himself started selling breakfast because I saw that. I saw, Jack's and all these other places, they have lines out the door. So I'm not saying, I grew up here, I've lived here for 19 years, I love this place, but times change. Back then when he had his card up, right, he had the same idea, but he couldn't because the laws restricted it. So as the laws change, as everything changes, we have to evolve with them too. And I genuinely, like you guys have this ordinance already. I don't think necessarily anyone that ends up on Front Street, it's not going to be a bad looking cart. I don't think you guys would allow that. But I do think, like I said, it definitely adds just options. I mean, the other day, I brought out some food to the city workers and they were really thankful. But other than that, no one else was going to do that for them. If there were street vendors right there, they could walk over to the car, get some food, and continue working. And so I just have to say, things were a certain way for many years, but this law has passed, and it is in effect, and we can't deny that. So I just think we should roll with the punches and see what we can do. I think we should all work together as a community because there's a lot of money here, all around. So I think everyone can, could be something here. So thank you guys.
And what is your name, young man?
My name is Juan Carlos Olvera Silva. It's my full name.
Hi, Juan. Thank you. Okay. Any other comments?
Mine's a question, perhaps more than a comment. If there is a limit decided upon, whether it's 20 or fewer by virtue of a boundary drawn, is that a lottery process or first come, first served? Or I was not clear on how you would select that. So
right. Good question.
As currently drafted, it would be first come, first serve.
Oh, okay.
And is there a time limit, or is it on a daily basis? That's what I wasn't clear about.
Right now, it's a 6-month permit.
6 month.
But I think Steve mentioned, maybe a 12-month, a longer time, or maybe it was our staff, I forget. Somebody raised the issue of, it says 6 months, but you could do something different. So we can do a 6-month permit, a 12-month permit.
And then little things, nuts and bolts, are like, okay, so I get my permit in, but I really only want to be there 3 days a week. Do you have to be there 7 days a week? You have to be there 5 days a week. If I'm not going to use mine, can you come in and you do the other days? I mean, there's all those kind of.
You may not.
Why not?
Because it says in here, and the law requires that the permit is personal. It's non-transferable. So I know somebody made a comment about somebody wants to get 3 of them.
Right.
They wouldn't have the ability to utilize 3 of them. I mean, I guess they could use a different one on the day or something, but the permit is personal. So you couldn't get it and then give it to Pam to use on
Not
Tuesday.
to give it, but I only want to, but I'm first come, first served, but I tell you, I only want to work 3 days a week.
You have a permit for
And
6 months.
and that took off, and then that would keep somebody who wants to work full-time, wants it to be a full-time job, right? And they have to man it themselves?
Yes, it is personal to the person who gets
So my
the
kid
permit.
can't do it?
Nope.
Okay.
Just as a follow-up, because as I walked back to the chair, another member of the audience asked me if you could tell us where it points out the first come, first served, because a couple of us have read it and did not read it that way.
So the way it's written, it doesn't say first come, first serve. You just come in, you apply, right? And you fill out, you have the background check and all the little boxes checked. You get one. There's only 11 left.
Okay. So everybody the first 12 people come in and want to sell T-shirts, and now we don't have a hot dog stand.
Yep. I believe that's how it's currently written. Yeah.
Okay, so I had a question about.
Was that the end? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut off your public comment, so I don't know if you had any more.
Okay.
My question at this point.
Okay. So I got confused at how we can allow them to be on the beach, because here, by definition, upon a public sidewalk or other pedestrian path, and a beach is not a path. So why would we allow somebody to set up on the beach?
I don't believe we allow the permanent ones on the beach. I think it's
It just says Crescent Ave.
vendor.
No more than one, and then 2 vendors may operate on the public beach areas.
So that would be just adjacent to the beach and be roaming, the sidewalk along the beach there.
Right.
There is a means for roaming vendors as well in this permit.
Okay.
So we'd hate to see more than 2.
Right.
Some would hate to see.
Right, and then my
less.
question is, because Steve did his homework, and I'm assuming we have too, in looking at that whole front street or whatever for the 6 of them, do you have a map of where those 6 fit in with all the parameters that have been set forth?
We do not. What we would like to do is probably take it a step further and have suggested guidelines, guidelines that they may not have, they don't have to follow, but being good and neighborly to the vendors that are already there, the business that are there, that we would point out those 6 spots, as well as what we would like a cart to look like, what we'd like the operation to look like, to go as smoothly as possible.
But if I got a backpack full of, I got a permit and I got a backpack full of T-shirts, I put up a card table, that's adequate. We can't really say much more than that. Is that correct, Elizabeth?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Please come on back up. One.
So I'm just going to read the first 2 paragraphs of the bill for you guys. Sorry, I'm a little nervous.
That's okay. You're doing a good job.
Existing law authorizes a local authority by ordinance or resolution to adopt requirements for the public safety regulating any type of vending and the time, place, and manner of vending from a vehicle upon a street. This bill would prohibit local authority as defined from regulating sidewalk vendors except in accordance with the provisions of the bill. The bill would provide that a local authority is not required to regulate sidewalk vendors. The bill would not provide that a local authority is not required to adopt a new program to regulate sidewalk vendors if the local authority has established an existing program that substantially complies with the previous provisions of the bill. The bill would apply these provisions to a chartered, I'm really nervous, to a chartered or general law city, county, or city and county. The bill would require a local authority that elects to adopt a sidewalk vending program to, among other things, not require a sidewalk vendor to operate within specific parts of the public right-of-way, except when that is a restriction is related to objective health, safety, and welfare concerns, and not restrict sidewalk vendors to operate in a designated neighborhood or area except as specified. The bill would authorize a local authority to, by ordinance or resolution, adopt additional requirements regulating the time, place, and manner of sidewalk vending as specified if the requirements are directly related to objective health, safety, same thing. The bill would also authorize a The bill would also authorize a local authority to prohibit sidewalk vendors in areas located within the immediate vicinity of permitted certified farmers markets. So I think what this bill is saying, and I've read it all, sorry, I'm like really nervous, but basically it says that unless you already had an ordinance in place, you have to adopt this new ordinance. And I don't believe that the city of Avalon did have an ordinance in place before. You were just halted from doing your food truck, or like Steve a few years ago, little stand. There was no actual ordinance. And now that this bill came out, now I see an ordinance. So my question is, and I don't, I'm always the young guy stirring it up, but this is the law right here. And we are a charter city. We're a city, we're city of part. We're a part of Los Angeles. So I think this bill applies to us as well. Now I understand business is ran differently here. But like I said, I don't necessarily see how this would make us look ugly, or how the street vendors, now I agree that like 30 carts, that's too much, but that's where we leave it up to you guys. Like I said, you guys will not allow a bad or ugly looking cart down Front Street. You won't even allow an ugly business here, so that's my point. But I think we could all work together and figure this out. So.
Okay, thank you.
Would you want Elizabeth to respond?
Elizabeth?
Oh, sure. So you're absolutely correct. So we don't have an ordinance currently, as I understand it. This law allows us to adopt one, but it limits our ability to regulate.
Right.
sidewalk vendors. So within the confines of the limitations within state law, you can place reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions, and your restrictions need to be objective and focused on health and safety.
Right. Okay. Council?
Brenda?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Brenda?
Brenda, Supervisor Las Lomas. Just, I just kind of went over the bill and we read over it together, actually. And my understanding with regard to what you were saying about what it looks like is that the city cannot say anything about what you're selling or what it looks like. And so I think that's kind of what the tricky part is as a business owner. The Planning Commission takes great care in how we present things to our city. I mean, great care. There's a process, there are guidelines, there are restrictions, there's a certain amount of feet required for any type of signage. So a business owner can not only, I think it's 8 feet, 2 by, whatever, it can have an 8 feet sign. According to the bill, a street vendor could have one this big with flashing neon, which we don't even allow neon on our thing, because the bill is so
loose,
lacking. It's intended to do that. So the argument that my husband made about designating the promenade area from the mall to the casino seems like a really appropriate way to preserve the integrity of design that the whole entire planning commission and our city has adopted for about 100 years. I mean, I don't remember coming up on the centennial, I'm not sure. But it just seems like that's been fine. I do respect, like you said, that the things do change. But I think we are a city of nostalgia, and I think these things are very important to our residents as well as our visitors. And I think that it would be I would hope that the City Council would choose to preserve the ideals that the visitors and the residents, for the most part, have protected for over the 100 years. And I think in protecting this promenade, so to speak, you wouldn't allow for a neon sign, because the truth is, the way it's written, I believe, is that they can have neon, they can have flashy, you can have a little wonky man. I mean, you can kind of do whatever you want, and I don't think the city can have any say on that. So the only way to do that would be to designate where it can happen.
Right. Thank you, Brenda. Steve?
One thing that came up, and I mean, I think there's a lot of things that are very inconsistent of what we're saying and what's in here, and everybody can interpret them differently. But in the original Senate bill, it also does say that you said that 1 permit per 1 person of their own person. It actually says in here that a sidewalk vendor can be an agent of an individual, company, partnership, or corporation of the name of the business. And I don't see anywhere in the original one or the city one that says it's limited to 1 per person, unless you can tell me where that is. And then
Section G, sidewalk.
Okay.
Section G, transferability. A sidewalk vending permit shall not be transferable to any other entity or person and is valid only as to the original applicant.
So,
yeah, but that doesn't mean the applicant can't have agents.
It's only valid as to the original applicant, as the way this
I
is
mean,
written.
I'm hearing what Steve's saying.
Well, it just says it right in here that it can be a corporation to have a, so that's not true then?
We are doing our best to restrict it to 1 person.
Oh, so it may be not saying that, but that's what you're trying to get it done.
So it's not Weddings by the Sea, it's Annie Marshall, and only Annie Marshall
Well,
can
and
do
yeah,
it.
and my husband can't
No.
sell the hot dog.
No hot dogs. I'm just kidding.
No hot dogs.
No hot dogs. I'm just kidding. I'll eat them all.
Bacon wrapped scallops.
Okay, you're on.
Okay. Ooh, not a bad idea. Okay, team, what do we want to go along with? How do we want to proceed?
Well, I'll jump in.
Yeah,
so I have always felt that Front Street is problematic from a safety standpoint. We've had this discussion in connection with outdoor dining. We had a vendor, a very successful merchant from town, Jerry Dunn, came in, and we had extensive look at what's available, and it's just with the number of people and suitcases and strollers and everything else. I agree with Mr. Have's statement that I think that from the mall to the end of probably through to the casino, because even as you get to the area in the Casino Bay there area, right before the casino, I think it's just, again, narrow. You have a lot of people passing that way. It's a major thoroughfare. So I would agree that I think that we would be well within our rights to make appropriate findings, that there are safety considerations that argue against having vending in those areas. So I'll start with that.
Okay, so I'll second that notion that my notes, I had actually said Crescent between Clarissa and Metropole, but you're absolutely right on the summer months specifically, trying, even if you're just a person wanting to walk out to the casino area for lunch or whatnot, it is extremely difficult to get through there in general with all of the visitors and local, the what? I'm sorry, what? Okay, it's sort of disruptive when you guys are talking there and I'm trying to get my thoughts out. So I certainly would agree to that, but I also think that areas in town that we are not currently servicing from, like, say, food standpoints would be all along up the canyon, which has become hugely popular. The park across the street here, and I even think that adding the ability to have one vendor out on whatever day they want to go to the fuel dock, the city park that's now the fuel dock, until such time as we determine what we're going to do out there. That's sort of off the beaten path, but it's still kind of on city property, and it's, something until we figure out what's going to happen with that property. But Machine Gun Park, I would even say it would be appropriate to have two vendors. This park is so long over here. Mm-hmm. And then I also want to make sure that we take into consideration, my total request was 6 permits to start with, not 12. I felt like 12 was quite a bit for our small, really 1 mile area. If we really see some movement up the canyon, then 2 miles of our city. But I also want to take into consideration, at least have the conversation, that we have an exclusive agreement with Virgie's Snack Bar up at Joe Machado Field, and that's technically considered a city park. So how do we?
It's already permitted.
It's already clarified.
Oh, it is? Okay. I missed that then. I'm sorry. So those are kind of and I'm absolutely not at all in favor of vending on the public beaches themselves. We have such limited sand area for visitors as it is.
It's a hazard, almost.
And I just can't feel confident about that.
I would exclude Don Conby Park because it's a park, but it is on the way to the mall, which just gets very, very busy. So I would.
Yeah, I meant to include that.
Yeah.
And for that matter, actually, the walkway along the Lover's Cove, I can see the area across the street from the stairs. There's a little area there, but I think given how much traffic there is on Pebbly Beach Road, that sidewalk there, and certainly the dirt path that takes you from Abalone Point out would not be appropriate either.
Well, that's would be considered a street, right? And we're not allowing them to be in the street. That's kind of the street. That's not a designated anything, right? It's just.
I guess. I think I'd rather err on the side of being specific. If we don't think it's appropriate, I'd rather say, it's not technically a sidewalk, but by the way, we don't allow vending there.
Because it's dirt, pretty much. Okay. Well, okay, and I'm kind of in agreement. I think we could probably put one around Don Conby Park, though. I think there's a place, and there's kids, and there's activity, and that might be nice for a PB&J and a peanut butter and jelly. And something if there's kids. And again, if we can dictate the size somewhat, then my other question is a roaming sidewalk vendor. So if I've got my T-shirts in my back and I want to walk down, because I can walk down a sidewalk and sell something going out to the casino, that's really not causing a big problem if it's just something like that, or a ball cap or whatever, or a, so I think I'm trying to loosen it a little bit, but I think 12 is a lot definitely think 12 is a lot, especially while we start out, and then if it's kind of like cannabis, and then, it seems to work well, and we do another one. But,
And I don't know if we have any comparables from other cities of how many vendors per square mile they have.
Most cities don't limit the number.
Oh. Okay.
But like Santa Monica must have already had something in place, because they have the musicians, and so they've already had something in place for a long time. And it doesn't seem to be very restrictive on the
But musicians
boardwalk.
would fall under a different thing. That would fall under busking.
Yeah, and then
wouldn't
they
it?
have other stuff out there as
Oh,
well,
yeah.
too.
Right.
But,
Well, there are First Amendment rights associated with musicians, artists, those sorts of things. That's different than vending.
oh, okay.
Very different
Okay.
set of rules.
Yeah, but they do have vendors there, so it'd be curious.
But, well, you're talking about on the Mall Street.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have a specific ordinance for that.
Yeah.
But the ordinances that I looked at from other cities are finding a way to restrict the number by saying it's, 1 per acre or 2 per acre. So by necessity, that restricts the number that you can end up with, depending on how big an area you're talking about. But I agree with Cindy. I definitely, the path up to the Memorial Gardens, there's space there, and in our 2 parks.
So we would have to look at those areas
Yeah.
to see if they fit within the other requirements.
Right.
I'm not familiar with that area specifically, but
Yeah.
it has to be, 6 feet wide. We can't have ADA issues. So we could not issue a permit to someone who, if that area, or maybe over by Lovers Lane or Lovers Cove.
Lovers Cove, right.
Lovers Cove, the sidewalk area that you were concerned about, if it's less than 6 feet wide, or would create an ADA issue, then we wouldn't be able to put a
Right.
permit over there.
Right.
So we can, so truly with all of the parameters that we have in here, can we decide can we do that study and to find out what they are, instead of waiting to, everybody gets the permit, and we go, oh, now I'm sorry, you can't do this, and now I'm sorry, you can't do that? Is there a way to?
I could not do that for you.
Right.
I suspect
no, I
that your GIS people could probably put that together.
Yeah. But then if I've got a backpack, it might not be as impactful as if I have a cart.
Correct. And you do have provisions in here for.
So then you could
for,
say, it's the
roaming.
size.
Thank you. That's the word.
So it's a size enough, this size could fit this. And then if I have a hot dog and you have a T-shirt, and the space, we could be next to each other then, perhaps if we're not using up all the space, because.
Again, there's limitations on how close you can be to each other, how far you have to be
Oh,
from
okay.
doors. There's
Okay.
There's a lot of limitations.
Then I think we need to find out what fits. Right? What would fit where? Because with all of these restrictions, if you're looking at that park and Machine Gun Park and.
Well, the only restrictions I'm saying or agreeing with is Crescent, is the areas that are so saturated with visitors and locals walking around and strollers and suitcases and people trying to maneuver around. That's the only restriction I see, other than the number. But I think there is so much opportunity for vending. I think there's places in town such as the park here, all the way up the canyon. There are some places that would be really beneficial. I like the idea of across the street where the little dive shack is on Lovers Cove. That's a possibility. It seems like that's.
Traffic. The traffic speeding by there, encouraging people across the street to go buy something, and somebody's gonna get nailed.
Well, don't we encourage them to go across the street and rent something right now?
Only on cruise
We
ship
don't?
days.
No, just cruise ship is private, it's operated.
And on the weekends, in the summer?
Well, we could look at that.
I get what you're saying, but I also appreciate what Juan Carlos is saying, is that, there is some opportunity for it here.
I agree. The canyon's a great opportunity. A lot of people walking up there.
I bet there's not as many opportunities as you think up there because there's road and then there's Island Company property. We don't know much of that. That's why when Stevie Haves did it, you didn't do it with the city. You were on Conservancy property when you were a little kid. You don't remember? I remember your cart.
Most of that's our road.
Okay, but
I can
how
tell
far
you,
back?
I can tell you just, and speaking to Ivan up the canyon, it's difficult up there. People that are headed up the canyon are generally been through town. They've probably fueled up before they've gotten up there or started up there. And Ivan's found it really tough to be up there on a daily basis and be open. So that's just some feedback from him.
Yeah.
So if I could maybe summarize a little bit. So not to exceed 6. We're looking at possibly 2 at Kids Park, 1 at the Fuel Dock, 1 at City Park, Don Kanabe Park.
No, Don.
Well, maybe. If he can find room, I think it's worth looking into. Can we look into it?
Okay, look into it.
Okay. Depends on, it could be a small little thing. Ice cream for your grandkids.
But again, not to exceed 6. We would come back with some modifications to the ordinance reflecting that, maybe, and with these staff suggested guidelines, if you will, what those might look like, so we get some uniformity. Carts we'd like to see look like, whether they do that or not. And then I think we need to just talk to council further to make sure this is all defendable. These limitations.
So is it defendable between on Sumner, the pedestrian walkway goes all the way to the alley?
Sidewalks aren't wide enough.
On Sumner, tell me again, Sumner from
Crescent to the alley.
Oh.
The corner of Lloyd's and
Right.
and all of that.
That's a street, and then you have the sidewalks.
Okay, but that's not that is, I guess vehicles do go on that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, never mind. I was just trying to think. Okay. All right.
I'm
okay more?
That sounds good. So, and then the other issue, I think that Steph had asked for direction as to whether a live scan would be required.
yes.
And it seems to me we don't require it for store owners.
No.
So I don't think it's appropriate to require
I don't
it for-
either.
Okay.
And
then-
one other thing, their sales tax permit should list an Avalon address.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so we got our cut of the sales tax, because we're not getting anything else.
I guess. And then
So
are we
there's
fine-
seller's permit.
Are we fine with a 6-month permit to start with, or go hand in hand possibly with a 6-month review, and then we can revisit it at that point?
Yeah,
Okay.
that sounds good.
Okay.
This was good work, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Big improvement.
Okay, did we miss anything out there?
Allison, did you have another comment?
Oh,
Sorry.
and Glenn and
Okay, I'm thinking 2 or 3 dozen would be nicer, not 6. We need vendors. I lived in Philadelphia and in Washington, D.C., and in Key West, and the best thing of living in those cities are the street vendors. Everybody loves them. Today, you could die before you find somebody to bring you a drink on the beach. We need people on the beach walking around selling ice cream and drinks and, lemonade and whatever. I think we should be encouraging that. I think we should be encouraging the young people in this town get out there and make some money and get something going. I don't want to see this overregulated. I think we need them not halfway up the canyon where nobody's going to make any money, but where the people are. So, near the center of town, near the beaches is where we need these vendors. Some of us are tired of paying $50 for hamburgers and $6 for an ice cream cone. It'd be nice to have a nice little street vendor out there you could go to, especially if you knew it was a young person you were helping support. So I'm just talking in favor of don't be meanies here and, restrict them from selling lemonade. I think we should be encouraging this, and the more the better.
Thank you, Allison.
So based on those comments, and Allison, you said those ones before as well, but is there a maximum age limit that we could put on it, which I think would be an age discriminatory thing, but when you're, like what you're saying is, I'm with you. I want to encourage the youth of our community to go out and try to start a business and try to do things, but I mean, the 5 people that have spoken to me, they're not youth in the community. They're current business owners that are like, well, if we're going to do this, I'm going to go out there and do it. So I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you, but I'm not sure that that's actually what we're going to get.
And How old does the person have to be to fill out a permit?
18.
18?
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, there's a little disagreement here. I used to have a vending company over here, and I had a vending machine at the Memorial Gardens, and did really well. It sold a lot of Cokes, Diet Cokes.
And Stevie did really well up at the canyon.
So people are walking up the
You
canyon.
did
to buy
do
stuff.
very well
Yeah.
at the canyon, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
So just in regards, you guys are making safety a huge thing, and I agree, especially on the Front Street. So you guys put a photo booth down there recently.
Yes.
Right in the parameters where you guys are actually saying. Let's just, just what if? What if there's a huge line of people right there waiting to get into that photo booth, right? Because it takes a few seconds.
Right.
And that right there, I mean, did you guys discuss?
Yes, we.
Right. So I mean,
did.
I'm not saying like I disagree. Like I agree that like if we had 10 trucks on Front Street, it probably it would not be detrimental. I do agree we have to limit that somehow, especially on Front Street. But I don't think not allowing anything. I don't think that's honestly fair because there is plenty of walkway. Like you were saying, right by that Leo's and Lloyd's, there's no cars there. That's not the main front strip to walk through and get to your hotel. It's off kind of to the side where people sit and have their coffee. There's a huge amount of space. Same thing right in front of the Marlin Club. So, and also you guys are basically, there's like the attorney was saying, there's a lot of provisions in there. You guys are talking about a cart. Now, cart, I don't even think I want to go for a cart. It's just paperwork wise and all these things. But there's 4 different, little subdivisions there that we haven't even talked about. And I just think for the people that do want to get a cart, I mean, it shouldn't just be shunned. If you guys are concerned about traffic, I don't think that photo booth is a good idea whatsoever. The other thing I want to mention is like customer service. That's what we do here on this island. That's how we all make our money back. Except for you guys, but if we are bringing
I beg to differ.
things to the people, that's what people come here. They come here to get treated. They come here to like she was saying. If you're on the beach and someone walks up to you with an ice cream cone, like that's heaven. You're looking up to like God, or a cold drink or something. So I mean, you can look at it as traffic and I don't. Not everyone wants to do this. That's another thing. Not everyone is willing to actually become a street vendor. So I also think we should kind of, pump the brakes and let's just see how many applications you guys really do get and how it kind of plays out. Because not everyone, is going to jump on it. So I think we should just give it a little bit of time and see how it pans out. I also do have a few questions for Elizabeth, the attorney. If a City of Avalon ordinance is passed, would I have to follow that ordinance, or do I have to follow the bill that came out? Because it says technically that if you did not have an ordinance, that you would have to adopt. That's what the bill says, and so that's just a little. You're an attorney, so.
So I can't give you legal advice, but what I can tell you is that once the city adopts an ordinance, it is the law in the city of Avalon.
Okay.
And anyone who does not comply with it is subject to prosecution.
That sounds like a good answer to me.
Sounds like an attorney, doesn't it? Come on up, Glenn.
Thank you. I'm Glenn Gustafson. I feel like one really good idea flew by in all of this discussion here. And that is the open space on the fuel dock. Harborfront space is currently wasted. It's used so little, and it has no purpose of any significance. And I think that, as Cindy mentioned, that a street vendor there or some kind of food vendor could provide some hospitality and make that a very inviting, attractive place instead of just a dead zone as it is now.
And to add to that, I mean, you're so right. However, the city is trying to move forward to get, so it would be a temporary site basically for someone. It wouldn't be forever, but yes, it perhaps could, depending on timing, perhaps. Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
When?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Glenn.
I think we've given good direction.
And he's going to volunteer some property for vendors. Thank you.
Good evening, Paul DeMeyer, 201B Calle del Sol, here representing the Santa Catalina Island Company. As you may be aware, we've been involved in the meetings and have a very large and significant presence on the commercial side in town. And I'd like to let you know that the company is very supportive of the underlying intent of the new state regulations, including SB 946, which encourages entrepreneurial activity. We'd like to support people like Juan Carlos and others who want to continue making headway in the economic environment. The company is equally supportive of the City of Avalon's desire to provide guidelines, as Dan was saying, and to regulate or control the activity such that the unique ambiance and character of our community is not negatively impacted. To us, it's clear that the most attractive locations for vending entrepreneurs would be to position themselves or their carts along the Avalon Bay waterfront, between the mall and the casino building, and particularly on Front Street and the Crescent Avenue areas. All the discussion about other opportunities in town are appropriate, but most people who are going to be entrepreneurs are going to come right down where they can on Front Street and Crescent Avenue. Accordingly, we agree with the findings of the City Council as put in the staff report that the sidewalk vending activities on Front Street and Crescent Avenue could impact traffic, could impact pedestrian safety and mobility, and that regulating such activities in this area is, quote, necessary to ensure the public's use and enjoyment of natural resources and recreational opportunities. And further, quote, necessary to prevent undue concentration of commercial activity that is unreasonably interfering with the scenic and natural character of the area. So we encourage the council to approve the ordinance either as drafted or with the suggestions for improvement and clarifications that you heard this tonight, and to implement the recommendations to the second hearing.
Excuse us.
Is it your phone?
I have no idea.
Sorry for the interruption.
Sorry, Paul.
Okay, no worries, Holly.
Well, that was embarrassing.
It's still coming.
So we support the recommendations for the 6-month trial period, after which it can be better determined if the rules and regulations are sufficient or if the ordinance might need to be amended to address additional issues. But let's move this process forward.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes. And well, okay, so you were talking about we can't discriminate, but if the intent was for entrepreneurial, then can't you just give it to new entrepreneurs? Elizabeth, you're not full of good information or the stuff we want to hear. You're full of information.
I'm full of information. I'm not sure it's always the answer you're looking for.
Exactly. Okay. And Mike?
So you may only have objective criteria.
Right.
So I'm not sure that a limitation on existing businesses or age or something like that would qualify as an objective criteria, and may also raise constitutional issues under the Commerce Clause.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, one of the big issues here is rents that the brick and mortar retailers need to pay to compete. And I think we can parallel it to the same issue that came up with the minimum wage being raised in a lot of cities. People are an affordable wage for people living in big cities. Essentially, this was, going to be the end of the world and they'd all go broke. But what happened is, and you're seeing it daily, they're renegotiating rents and leases that were completely overinflated in these different areas to accommodate, say, for this increase in minimum wage. The same thing goes for here and in other places where you have street vendors. It's going to happen. The state says it's going to happen. But that also, most of the rents around here are month to month, and even leases can be adjustable. But, the reality is that the retail businesses need to go in and renegotiate some rent. It could be too high here. I don't know. I don't pay any myself, but at least for retail space, there might be something there that gives some relief and equity to the brick and mortar people. So anyhow, that is a trend. Leases are constantly being negotiated, rents based on, be it the increase in the minimum wage. And it always seems to be that these things happen in these inflated places where needed some adjustment anyhow. Thank you.
No, that's interesting. Good point. Yeah. Okay, so do we have direction?
So I think we need a continuance.
Yes.
And have this come back in a few weeks. A motion to continue this and give staff the opportunity to follow up on some of the direction
So
we
moved.
received.
Okay.
Second.
Okay.
Do we actually vote on that?
Yeah.
4 ayes, 1 absent. Hernandez?
And then I do have one question. As people, so people are telling you, giving you their name and what they want to do, kind of, is that correct, Ann? Okay, but they're not number one on the list until all of the stuff is done? Because, or do you say, at what point are they number one on the list?
So like I said, we've taken 5 applications. We took all 5 of them today. None of them are complete. So I would suggest, and I'll call each of them individually tomorrow saying, it doesn't become complete until everything is in. And then at that point, you are 1 on the list, 2 on the list, and we'll take it from there.
But is it but it's premature for them to go out and purchase something and get their insurance and all of that? So basically, they're just on the list in order for now. And then all of a sudden we say, okay, now you can all go out. Or what if somebody goes out right now and
No,
okay.
I think what Dan's saying is he's looked through the applications and none of them are complete. They don't have all the information, and we don't usually put somebody on a waiting list until you've submitted a complete application.
But the complete application, is that the insurance? Is that the business license? What?
Everything that would be currently on our resolution that you adopted.
The one that we adopted last meeting, which makes it
Okay.
essentially like an encroachment permit.
Okay.
Yeah, so maybe we kind of keep them in a holding pattern. They can get their ducks in a row, and as soon as it gets approved, and then it's first one in. I would hate for somebody to put out money for some of these things if this doesn't get approved.
And are
it
those
goes in a different
applications
direction.
by people who thought that they were going to be on Front Street?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah. See, given the discussion tonight, they may no longer be interested.
That's true as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, item number 11. There's a number of people in the audience for this item today.
Just as a little background history, so on July 1st of 2018, the City Council adopted our fee schedule, which included a 3% fee increase on all harbor-related services, and it consolidated the shoulder and the winter mooring fee rates. And then at the December 4th City Council meeting, when we had the introduction and adoption of our wharfage increase, some concerned citizens came out and to speak out about the mooring fees, and so we were directed to bring this back, and here it is. And we provided you a chart with what the past shoulder rate and winter rates were, and I'll let JJ take it from there. But
Hi, Council. I'm here for questions. Would you like to have the public speak and then we'll come back? Is that what you like?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that.
I'm sorry.
I could make a motion.
What?
I said I could make a motion.
Or,
if
okay.
you wanted. I mean,
Well, let's just start with that and see what, because, they still have time for public comment based on a motion you might make. Okay.
I would like to make a motion that we reverse our original decision to change the winter season rates from pay 2, get 5 to pay 4, get 3. I'm actually not in favor of rescinding the 3% fee increase, but for changing the mooring rates themselves. during that winter season.
So I have the three separate times, Cindy, for the
To go
shoulder
back,
rate, winter rate, and then the shoulder rate again, and then our on-season?
Yeah, winter rate 1, September 15 through October 15. It was pay 4, get 3. Then from winter rate, October 15 to Palm Sunday was pay 2, get 5 free. And shoulder rate number 2, Palm Sunday through June 15 was pay 4, get 3 free. So we had determined but previously to change the winter rate from October 15 to Palm Sunday to the same as shoulder rate 1 and 2, which was pay 4, get 3 free. And my proposal would be to rescind that portion of the decision and sync the rates back to the winter rate. Pay 2, get 5 free for those or 3 months in some cases. I have seen the impact of this. I firmly believe, and I'll speak from my heart, that I believe we are impacting our local community, not sharing an impact on rate increases to visiting members of our community. I think we are not, at this time, a 100% year-round community like others. We are still working that direction. There's many factors that help us in the winter. Seeing and being involved in so many different businesses in the 13 years that I've been here, I see the impact that this has had on our local boating community. And it's the burden of the increase in fees has been borne primarily by our local boating community, which is a very small number of members of our community, and that does not feel good to me. So that's a personal opinion. I've heard from probably 75, no less than, members of our boating community, that some that come and visit in the winter, some that don't come here in the winter because the rates have doubled, to participants in our community that are barely able to make ends meet as it is, that it just, to me, I feel that the right decision is to go back to the way it was, and we need to put our thinking caps on, and we need to find a way to raise additional funds. And I've said it many times at many meetings so far that we need to bring visitors back to this community, and we have seen the decline in the number of boat visits to the island, and I think we need to take a good hard look at why that's happening. And that was another reason for my request to put back in place a harbor discussionary committee that would help look at all of these different things. So I will step off my soapbox, and those are my thoughts.
Yes.
Madam Mayor, I have an alternative plan, but...
I mean, she did make a motion, but do you want to hear this before?
I'm happy to hear any other comments.
Yeah.
Happy.
I agree that the local boaters are most impacted by this fees that we adopted, but I also think that one of the things we want to do is we don't want to turn the harbor into a place where people from the mainland abandon their boats here for the wintertime because they don't want to pay the mooring fees over there. So having a revenue neutral idea, with taking your ideas of the three-tiered, what if we create an annual rate that is a blended rate of all those dollars, so the boaters that are here on an annual basis, they'll pay the lower rate, and then other people that come will pay the regular rate.
Well, if we are following all of the rules that, as I understand it, so I'm happy to learn if I may have this incorrect, but if we're following all the rules, such as insurance requirements and functional vessels in the harbor, then we shouldn't be even discussing whether or not people are going to come over and abandon their boats. And we don't have a choice whether people come and abandon their boats outside of city harbor limits. That's clearly going to happen. But if you're inside the harbor, it is my understanding that you have to have a working vessel and you have to have insurance.
For stays over 10 days.
So why are we, for stays over 10 days, then why don't we amend that? If you're going to come to our harbor, you have insurance. Less than 10 days.
Where's JJ? Oh.
I mean, that sort of.
So the question is that realistic? Just,
right, fair,
you know,
fair.
if I buy a boat today, I would like to think I'd have insurance because I would sure need it, but go ahead.
The one thing we need to remember is State Lands Commission. What we do for one, we have to do for everybody.
Exactly.
So if you do a annual, it's got to be put out to everybody. So that means everybody on the mainland can get an annual deal, and we may not in the summertime have a place for them because of all the owners that come over and the lease mooring owners. But it's something to look into. I'd have to check with State Lands regarding that particular deal. We do have our ordinance that says you have to have insurance. Your boat has to be able to operate with the proper engine on it, and the issue is we're getting sailboats with 4 or 5 horsepower engines on them that can't operate in 15 to 20 knot winds. So, you know, we really keep that, and you got to have a functioning head.
And so what do you do about that because when they first come in, you put a dye tablet in them, right?
Right.
And then if you look and they don't have them, and then what's your recourse?
Well, our recourse is that we don't allow them to, we give them the opportunity to get it fixed. So if you need a bigger engine, you need to buy a bigger engine. Mm-hmm. If you have a cluttered deck, that's another one of the stipulations. You have to tidy up your deck. So if we get on it in the middle of the night during a storm, we're not getting hooked up and everything. So we give them an opportunity to fix it. A lot of people go out and they put it on anchor because they even have difficult paying the 2 for $5. Mm-hmm. People come to the mainland, bring their boats in. They might anchor them outside city waters, but during a storm, all of a sudden we have to get them and bring them in under the Safe Harbor Act, to where if small craft goes up, we have to provide, and then they don't pay. Right. They go back out on anchor. They don't have the money to pay in the first place. So, I mean, it's a difficult situation, and I understand the argument about the mooring fees, and that's good, but I just think there's some state lands issues that people fail to understand, that we cannot give different mooring fees because you're in the harbor or you compared to being out in Descanso. So we have, whatever we do, we have to do it across the board.
Consistent.
I understand that. I guess what I've probably wanted to say several times and haven't is, if you as the harbor master feel that you have a derelict boat situation, then I think we need to address that under those terms. And I think we need to look at how do we do that. But that, to me, is not the reason to change the mooring fees, is to try to keep those vessels out of the harbor. That doesn't feel good.
We have legislation already involved saying that you have to follow certain rules. 90% of the people follow those rules. And you're right, there is a 10 consecutive days if you're here. I'm not positive on the exact wording that they have to have. So even when they come in, they don't have to have the insurance, but whatever that time period is, then they have to have it, which is pretty substantial. The insurance is pretty substantial.
And I'm not suggesting that we're charging different rates. I'm suggesting there's an annual rate and anybody's eligible to buy it. But it stands like all of the things. You know, when all the owners show up, you're going someplace.
Exactly, but we have difficult doing that. Some people don't want to come down and move their boat because they're playing golf or something. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm open to any suggestions. And when this whole thing started, you know, we were tasked with try to find a ways to raise some money. We did that, and didn't hear any feedback at all. So I work for you. You tell me what you want to do. I'll do whatever you guys want to do.
Did you see the letter from John King?
I'm sorry, from who?
Did you see the letter from John King?
I did.
Do you see the conclusions he draws from that?
I think there's some inaccuracies there, but yeah. I mean, again, what we do for one, we got to do for everybody. Mm-hmm. And the base of the email is that we're picking on the locals, and we're not. everybody has to pay the same. If it's your decision to move it back to the 5 for 2 and the shoulder rates compared to the winter rates, then obviously that's what we'll do. But if we can modify that a little bit, maybe instead of having a shoulder rate and a winter rate and a shoulder rate, which gets really confusing when people come to pay, arrange the winter rate, just make it one winter rate and be done with it.
But JJ, did you, and I would happily love to direct staff to go back and watch the meeting, but did you, I believe that we requested a letter be sent out to all harbor use permits and mooring owners that the rates were going to increase. Did you guys do that?
I don't recall that.
So it just sort of happened, which is where it happened to be brought up to council members, was that when the rate changed on October 15, it happened because there was only maybe 1 or 2 persons actually watching the council meeting back in June.
I don't recall being directed to send out a letter. I mean, again, we can go back and look, but I don't recall that.
I mean, I think it's worthwhile because that was a majority of the comments that I received was that, oh, we didn't know. And my thought was, well, I thought we asked for participants to be sent information that the rates were going to increase. So, I mean, I do think it's important to verify that.
I mean, I know we did put it in the paper. We did, the fee increases and everything like normal. But I don't recall that.
Twice. John?
John King, 360 Marilla, Mayor, Council. Since Ole brought my name up with the note that I sent out, and I'm sorry I don't have all your emails. I put it out on the Great Catalina discussion page thinking that maybe that it would get out that way. But I think a lot of issues that have come up, but the one thing I want to say for sure is I support both of your suggestions. I think either one of those could work. Going back to what we had before, doing an annual. I would also say, and I think I've made it clear, that I don't think the intent is to target locals, but the de facto effect is that we're targeted. And, I think even in JJ's comments where he says, mooring fees through January 31st compared to the same time period show an increase of just over 10,000 despite a reduction in the number of boats per night. That reduction is 42% in January and 45% in December. That's what we're carrying. Right? If you think about it, okay, well, how do we end up with 10,000 more and yet a lot less boats? It's because I'm paying a lot more, and everybody who has a business is in the harbor is paying a lot more. 47% is my number. I think it'll vary a little bit from owner to owner because of the nature of the size of the boats and the way that they're scaled out. But I did see the proposal, and I wanted to try to make it clear. It's when we get into these discussions, we have a tendency to get all wrapped up and confused about shoulder seasons and days and rates, and I think that's partly how this thing kind of came upon us. I think you guys were as surprised as we were when we came here back December 4th and we're saying, what'd you guys do? Look at our mooring fees, because we all were kind of aware that 3% thing, but for some reason I don't think the loss of the winter rates was as clear, either in impact or even communicated out front there. So I wanted you to see on here, if you are looking at the harbor's proposal, it's still a pretty significant increase to go from 2017 to 2019. And what I tried to do here to try to simplify things is that instead of worrying about all of the shoulder rates or this and that, at the end of the year you've got 365-day years, right? And this is the impact to anybody who's having a boat in there on an annual basis. And so that impact is simple, it's clear. A 30-footer goes from $6,956 to $10,260 under the rules that we're currently operating under, and by the way, continue to pay today. Right? Tomorrow I'll be paying my mooring fees, and So part of what I didn't write in there was to suggest that maybe we need to recompense something for those of us who are sitting here carrying this burden. I don't want to go over the whole scale. I think you all get it. My point in coming up here is to say that I do want to support either going back and re-looking at this thing, doing an annual works for me. The whole notion of insurance, there's not a harbor in any marina I've ever been into that you can wait 10 days before you have to show your insurance. So that's not a burden.
Okay.
If you come and you bring a boat to San Pedro, the first thing they do is they say, where's your documentation and insurance? So it's not a burden. It's simply a matter of something that we haven't done here for whatever reason. It's kind of a remnant. Okay.
Thank you.
Probably because locals didn't have insurance.
Councilmember Elders, did you have any comments?
And the intent that I thought was to treat everyone the same, and there was a 3% increase, and that's in fairness, that's what we should be working back toward. If there are administrative issues, then I'm not sure I understand them, because we've been charging winter rates and shoulder rates for as long as I've been here. So, but if there's a better way to do it, then obviously I'd be, open to that.
Okay. And Glenn?
I wanted to support what John said and bring out a couple of other points. One is the principle of the users of a facility or a service paying for it. I'm all in favor of that. That's great. But the way that it is now, it puts an unfair burden on small boaters, and in particular, private boaters who don't have a business don't use a lot of these facilities in the harbor that need improvement. So, for instance, I don't go, as a boat owner, I don't go to Float 4 or Float 5 or the Mole any more than any of you do. So, projecting that cost on top of those small boaters, I think, is not fair, as Cindy has said so nicely. And secondly, the insurance absolutely makes sense. Why would you have it any other way?
Right.
So I think that needs to be clarified. Let's see, what else did I have? Oh yeah, the distinction between summer and winter needs to be maintained. And I think any proposal that averages the whole thing over the whole year is not a good idea, because our situation is so different here in summer and in winter. So that's all the comments I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, so no topic would be complete without Allison coming up. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you letting me say this again, but I think the important thing to remember is not only are we getting gouged here with these fees, they are the highest of any place in Southern California, and we're not getting anything for them. I think, I spoke a couple weeks ago just to give you an example of what you get at a marina anywhere in Southern California compared to what you get here. And I just want to remind you, we're getting very little for what we're paying. And we're typically paying 2 to 2.5 times as much as we pay at a full-service marina. So I think if you're going to raise rates for whatever reason, you have to justify those. And just because you're spending more money isn't a reason to justify them. We need to get some services and some benefits from this. So I absolutely am in favor of rescinding the way things are and going back to the winter rates. I think that has to be done. But I'd really like you to look at, rescinding some of the increases in fees, because the boaters that are paying for it are not getting the benefit of those services. So either you need to start providing some services to the boaters in this community, or you should reduce fees, not increase them. And especially most in favor of going back to winter rates and having, if there is a way to have a year-round rate for people who live here and have boats here, I think that would be beneficial. And I agree with Glenn, it's particularly a problem when you have a small boat. Because a lot of us, I have more than one boat, but my small boat I pay a disproportionate fee for because it's small and you don't have anything under 30 feet. So a lot of the boaters who have small boats are particularly paying an extraordinarily high fee.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is something that we could easily move on this evening, unless if we were going like with the Cindy proposal, but if there was,
we can go with the Cindy proposal.
Okay, but I mean, I'm sure they would like to see it put to rest, but I mean, you boaters out there, is it worth looking at that year-round thing to see if that's legal, or do you, JJ, do you think off the top it's just not?
I'm pretty sure it's not legal.
I'm sorry, Mayor, I didn't hear the question.
Oh, I was just curious about the year-round rate that he was talking about. Is that really, is it, Elizabeth,
The way I understand Ole's comment was the year-round rate wouldn't be about the same amount if you were doing the shoulder, the winter shoulder, and the on-season. So it's just like one payment. That's what you were saying, right?
And we did it at Two Harbors, and we ran it through state lands, and they understood as long as we're offering it to you and you, we're legit. If we just offer it to you and not Elizabeth, then we get in trouble.
So when do I pay my year? When do I pay that annual thing? Every month?
We can continue to discuss this if we want to go back to Cindy's idea.
Right, but I think you're onto something. If the rate is what it's going to be no matter what, and you pay, and you're going to pay the annual rate, I mean, I could walk into the harbor tomorrow and pay my mooring fees for 365 days.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I take ill and I don't want to be here. Do you give me my money back?
No. Not if you
I'm
get
just
a rate.
checking. I'm just checking.
Well, and here's the other thing is that, remember, is summertime, you may not get a mooring.
Right. That's
good point.
That's the
Yeah.
issue with the annual fee. I think.
I think so.
I think you're opening up a whole ball of worms here. And prime example, you're only here for 4 months, and I got to go to the mainland. Well, okay. Now we got to write a check for that?
Yeah.
I mean.
Like I park my car at Long Beach. It's not there all 365 days a year, but I pay the same amount.
I understand that, but I'm just saying on the boating public, when you don't have a mooring, and a lot of these boats go over to Jay's in the summertime because he's got a summertime amount.
Then I'm withdrawing my ideas for further consideration. Let's go with Cindy's idea.
I would go with that.
So if the consensus is to go forward with Cindy's motion, we would still have to come back and advertise 2 times in the paper that we're changing the fee schedule, and then it would come to council for you to adopt.
So say one more time what your proposal is.
So my proposal was to rescind, I guess we would be rescinding a portion of the decision that we made on
The winter rates and the shoulder weights.
I'm sorry, I don't remember, the June 19th meeting to change the winter rate from back to pay for 2 and get 5 free. Right. So we would be rescinding the change to pay 4, get 3 free. And that's the only part of that decision. I think the 3% mooring fee across the board year-round needs to stay, but the rescinding the winter rate.
So going forward, they're in the winter rates now. They're 4 for 3. Come Palm Sunday, the June 15th. It'll get changed from 2 for 5 in the winter rates. October 15th to Palm Sunday.
Right.
Okay.
It would be 2 for 5.
All right.
Back to where it was for the winter.
And then Palm Sunday, the June 15th, will go 4 for 3, back to 4 for 3.
So we're back to where we were.
Back to where we were.
Back to where we were.
And the only other
Only on that. I just want to be clear that the
3%
3% stays.
So you want to go back on both the shoulder rates and the winter rate?
No, only only.
It'll go to the shoulder rate then on Palm Sunday or Palm Monday.
We eliminated the winter.
Right. So you want to.
Oh, I'm sorry. We eliminated the.
We had eliminated the winter rate.
We eliminated the entire
So
shoulder.
you want to do
Oh, I
shoulder,
wanna-
winter, shoulder.
Yes.
Got it.
I want to go back to the way it was.
Got it.
Shoulder, winter, shoulder.
Right. Just want to make sure I've got it right.
Instead of shoulder and summer. Right? Does that make sense, everybody?
Yes.
And then with that, I agree we need to go out and look for revenue, but I think we need to find alternative ways. And I think that we need to try to figure out how to go back to, going from 66,000 boat nights in 2014 to 56,000 in 2018. That's a 10,000 boat night loss. I think we need to figure out why. And I'd love to see the city council, harbor, and community help to determine why are we losing visits to Avalon. So that's my motion.
Second your motion. Question is, once this goes to vote and if it passes, when does it start? Because I have to get a hold of our
July 1st.
I'm sorry?
It'll start in July because we can't adopt it until the first meeting in April.
Okay, so this will start July 1st next year.
Yeah.
Or July 1st of this year.
This year, 2019.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So then help me understand before, since we're still in discussion stage. So when you talk about the 3%, the 3% goes on the rate, the foot
On the
rate.
size
So
of the mooring.
So if I have a 37 foot.
Size of the boat.
Oh, so if it's 37, if the rate is 37 next year, I'm going to pay 3% more for that.
Well, you already are.
Well, you already are.
That already started
I know,
on July
I know.
1st. Yeah.
I know.
It's
And
not
then-
going to increase again.
And then the next year, no increase?
Not unless we hear it as part of, it would have to come to us as part of the budgetary and the fee schedule.
It's not automatic. We got to come back and justify it.
So we
what
could
we're
just,
doing.
we'll discuss that.
We'll discuss that at a later time.
Okay. Any last minute comments from there's Allison and John? I wasn't going to say that, but I wasn't.
Okay, one of the things I was going to bring up is that the reason to have year-round fees is you have a guarantee they're going to keep that boat in that harbor for the year, basically. And marinas do that everywhere. You pay for a year, but you get the 13th month free. So, I mean, that's a common practice everywhere. It gives you some incentive. You've got some knowing that everyone's not going to abandon you because you're going to have a certain number of boaters who basically prepaid.
Right.
And are willing to do that. But the other thing, when somebody brought up, Jay, well, I'll admit I moved my little boat to Jay's too, because I get 6 months for what I pay you in 2 months. Because your rates are so much higher, even in the harbor, there's a cheaper place to go. And I literally pay you 3 times as much as I pay Jay.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think you can look at this. There's some, ways to help the local boating community.
Right.
And whether that's asking them to pay in advance and getting a discount rate at the end or something. But I'd like you to look at that.
And so John, by going this route, what does that save you?
I'm sorry.
By going this
By essentially going back to 2017 is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's back to 69 versus the 10.
Essentially, it goes back to the rate definitions or periods of 2017 with a 3% increase on the base rate.
Okay, so it saves you almost $4,000.
Yeah. So in terms of the annual, you asked the question, is it worth considering? I think the answer is yes. I don't think you're going to do it here today. And I think you've already come to that conclusion too. There's a lot of issues there. Some are good. I think Allison was talking about some places when you do an annual, you do pay 12, get 13. So there's a lot of things you can do to manage your flow of the boats in the harbor. But one of the problems is that not everybody can afford to come up with 12 months on the front end, and so you do find yourself in that possibility of discriminating again against groups that you're not aware of. So
Right.
there's some stuff that could pop up but I don't think it should be abandoned without more consideration, I guess, is one of the issues.
Well, and one of the interesting things I think that Ole said as well, though, is if you're on a slip in San Diego, you're on the slip and you get that slip for a year. They don't move you around.
Right, that's not true here.
Yeah,
We've
here
got
you're
a
on
whole
somebody's
different
mooring.
dynamic and
Exactly. I
you
think
move
Jay-
all the time, and JJ's got to accommodate owners that are not calling in when they
Exactly.
should call in, but you try to be, we
Right.
want this to be a friendly place and everybody to
Right.
be happy with it. As you're considering this, I know you're going to love this one. It would really be cool if you could come up with some way of showing those of us who've been out there paying a ridiculously amount more, like I think I'm something in the neighborhood of $14,000 more into fees than I would have been had these changes not taken effect. If you could consider an amnesty or some such, I know you can't create subsets of populations, but I think this thing took all of us by surprise. I don't think you were intending to put this much pressure on those of us who do stay here year-round. And if in your discussions you can come up with a way to say, you know what, we see it, it hurt you, we got you, we got your backs, and maybe a month-long amnesty or something, just to kind of go, okay. It was a terrible couple of months. It took a little while to get it resolved, but at least we got this. So.
We will take that under advisement.
Okay.
I don't think that's a discussion for today, is it?
I know you don't like to give money back. I get it.
Okay, so.
That was my motion.
I seconded it.
Okay, further comment? Rhett?
Okay, I'll throw in my 2 cents here. I really appreciate your thoughts tonight from the council concerning a little rebate, if you will, on some of what we pay out there. This time last year, I paid roughly $300 a month to keep my sailboat in the harbor, and this will be my 6th winter. I do live on my boat. I got my first tour bus driving job here on the island because I lived on my sailboat, because there was such a shortage in housing, and drove for a year for the Stickler organization, and then a couple of years as well for the Island Company. I enjoyed all of it. I turned 65 last May, semi-retired. Okay, I'm on a fixed income here. I try and get a little extra work, but I guess what I also wanted to say, to intervene, Admiral is what I refer to him as. Poindexter here has got one fine crew of Harbor Patrol guys out there. Every one of them, except him, has come out and rescued my wretched old rump. This winter's been pretty hard on us for storms out there. And yeah, I chose to anchor out because I could not afford to come in the harbor. And when it got real gnarly, I came in. And through the grace of God, I do have insurance, and Mr. Poindexter has made that mandatory. And again, wonderful. Yes, good idea. But I want to thank you guys for coming up with these ideas, Councilor Cassidy, and Glenn's input, and certainly Allison, God bless her heart, and Captain King. I mean, he's got a whole fleet. I just have one little sailboat that. And I live very simply. I'm very happy. I'm blessed, my God, to be living here and have many, many wonderful friends, archangels. I mean, I'm surrounded by just wonderful people that do, in fact, care for me. And I feel that in my heart that this is home for me. I don't ever want to go anywhere else. This is where I'm gonna. Yes. Thank you for your input. Thank you for making this happen, helping make it happen, and I look forward to another 65 years here.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Red. Those were the kind words, very kind words. Okay, we're going to call for the vote.
4 ayes, 1 absent. Hernandez.
Okay, now we move on to... Thank you. Now we move on to the good stuff.
Now for the fun stuff.
Budget amendment. Okay. We're ready, Matthew.
Matt Baker speaking on behalf of the Finance Department. I wanted to provide council with a mid-year budget review.
And you're tall, so put your, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ellen.
Again, the purpose of this review is to discuss the current budget and to assess where we stand year to date. All the numbers that I'll be presenting for 2019 are as of December 31st, 2018. I will also include in the presentation some proposed budget amendments based on activity that's occurred since the budget was adopted. And again, this information will help serve as a baseline for forecasting next year's budget as well. So the first slide I want to show you is the fund balance schedule that was adopted. This is the 17-18 estimated fund balance schedule. And the reason why I wanted to bring this to your attention first has to deal with the second column on the left, the beginning cash balance. Again, those numbers were pulled from the 2017 draft CAFR that we had received back in October. The one thing I wanted to call to the attention is that general fund, that first line you see on there, the city has historically presented the general fund for budget purposes by combining the general fund activity, the internal service activity, and the special revenue fund activity all rolled up into one line item. I believe the rationale for this is just to simplify, given the number of funds the city does have. Unfortunately, when you combine them, though, some information does get lost in the combination. It's really important to think of all these funds as their own separate businesses, as certain of the funds are restricted as to what they can be used for. So again, historically, the city has rolled those up into the one general fund, and what I'm going to show you is what it looks like when you separate those out into separate funds, because it does impact where our cash balance assumption was where we started fiscal year 18, and that's going to roll into how we budget for upcoming fiscal years. So again, to recap, the city has historically used the cash balance as of the most recent CAFR as its starting point. We used the draft numbers we received back in October. Historically, we've rolled up the general fund, special revenue, and internal services into one line item. But what we didn't do when we rolled those up is we didn't roll up the cash balance in all three funds. We just used the cash balance in the general fund as the starting point. When the finance director and I put together the budget, we were following past precedent where that was where the number was pulled from. But in discussions subsequent to that, it's important that we separate those out and also show what the cash balances were in the internal service funds and special revenue funds, as that's going to skew where the starting balance is. Mm-hmm. So what I have here is a slide comparing the beginning cash balances for the 17-18 estimated numbers as presented back in October compared to what should have been presented based on the final CAFR figures. Again, the difference you'll see, or the primary difference between the draft numbers we received in October and now, is just that we did not include the cash balance in the internal service fund or the cash balance in the special revenue funds in our general fund line item. So again, we rolled up all those activities into one line item for our presentation, but we didn't roll up the cash balances into the starting point. Again, I think it's best to view those as separate, and so what you're going to see in the rest of the presentation, and my intention going forward, is to always show separate the general fund, the special revenue funds, and the internal service funds. Just a note on the bottom comment is we do receive $750,000 a year from the successor agency to the general fund as our administrative allowance and our PAE, our approved admin expenditures. For fiscal year 17, we never actually made the transfer from the successor agency to the general fund. So again, using that general fund cash balance as the starting point, that does not include the $750,000 that is due from the successor agency to the general fund. So again, that transfer should have occurred during fiscal year 17. It didn't.
Why didn't it? Or why haven't we corrected it now?
We have corrected it now, but since the transfer didn't occur until fiscal year 19, the transfer occurred in September of this year. But because the money as of June 30th was still sitting in the successor agency account, using the cash balance from the CAFR, that $750,000 is part of the $3 million in the successor agency rather than having been moved up to the general fund. Okay. So how that will be corrected and where you'll see later in the presentation is we increased the numbers for 2019 to show that 2017 revenue when it actually was transferred in 2019. Again, just to kind of highlight or to emphasize why I believe the new beginning balances are the correct balances to be using, I took a clip from the Treasurer's report from the fourth quarter of 2017 that shows the cash balance that was presented to council for the fourth quarter of 17, as well as the cash balance total from the latest CAFR, and you'll see that number is closer to $18.5 million as a starting point. And again, to go back a couple of slides, what we had previously presented showed a cash balance of 16.7. Again, what that difference was is we didn't include the internal service funds cash balance or the special revenue funds cash balance in our general fund figure. So this next slide, what this shows is a revised estimates for the 17-18 activity. Again, when we presented the budget, we didn't have the complete information for fiscal year 18, so we had to put up together estimates for what our expected activity was going to be. Since then, we obviously have better information to use as an estimate, and so what I did is I went back and looked at the estimates that we had previously created and compared them to where I think the 18 CAFR is going to show activity. And what you're going to see is that our operating expenditures exceeded our estimates by about 4%. And what I have lined out here is the main causes for those differences and the reasoning for it. Our salaries and benefits estimates were off primarily due to vacation payouts and sick payouts not being included in the budgeted numbers for fiscal year 18. There were some large payouts in fiscal year 18 that weren't factored in those budgeted figures. Also, the Environment Strategy Consultants contract, we had a number of large expenditures that weren't ultimately paid till July or August, and so when we were putting together the budget estimates, we underestimated where we ended up being for that account. Again, that shouldn't impact 2019, just 2018 estimates that were used. Again, we had some sewer emergency maintenance expenditures in late fiscal year 18 that exceeded what we had used previously as our estimate. And then lastly, and this I'll go into more detail later, but our Avalon Transit contractual services expenditures exceeded our estimate. When we were putting together the estimate, we relied on historical trends in the expenditures. This was particularly difficult for the finance department to do in 2018 because of changes to how we account for the Avalon Transit. Avalon Transit expenditures were split into two different funds. Some of them were to be reimbursed through local funds, whereas others are covered partially by user fees, with the rest subsidized by the general fund. Not having the full historical context of how those accounts worked, I think, contributed to the estimates we had made and why we need to make why we've made the revised estimates to show actual activity. Later on in the slide, I'll show what exactly those amounts go towards related to Avalon Transit. So again, here is the adopted fiscal year 19 budget using the new beginning balance numbers after considering the new cash balance as well as the updated estimates. Again, just to provide some context, this is just looking at operating revenues and operating expenditures for the city. This doesn't factor any grant revenue we would receive or any capital expenditures. So right now for this part of the presentation, I'm just focusing on our operating revenues and operating expenditures. And the main takeaway from this slide is really just that the general fund and the harbor fund are the largest sources of operating revenues and expenditures for the city. So as a summary for where we stand for the general fund, our sales tax revenues are projected to be approximately $90,000 less than estimated. I met with our sales tax consultant last week on this, and the driving factor for this decrease in the estimate is just businesses that in prior years were open that are currently closed. That impacts the amount of sales tax revenue generated as well as the city's portion of that. So what I've done is I've revised our estimate for fiscal year 19 to reflect what our sales tax consultant's latest projection was. Other operating revenues, however, do appear to be in line with our budgeted estimates. Sick and vacation payouts, however, weren't included in our budgeted expenditures for labor. And the amount is significantly less since most of the obligations of sick and payouts had been cashed out in 2018. However, there was still some in 2019 that had not been cashed out. What I'm doing is I am, in this assumption, is assuming that people cash out the maximum that would be available to them. So again, here is a summary of general fund operating revenues. What I've tried to do is compare where we were in each of these major revenue categories at the same point last fiscal year to this fiscal year. You'll see that more or less we are in line with where we were at this time last year. However, sales tax, based on the latest update from our consultant, we are projecting it's not going to meet our budgeted figure. So to go into operating expenditures, what I've done is I've tried to summarize operating expenditures by category: salaries and benefits, maintenance and operations, contract services, and then total operating expenditures. Again, this wouldn't factor in any capital expenditures in this. The one general fund expenditure that I would like to propose we revise relates to the LCP update. When we put together the 18 budget had $75,000 allocated to be spent in fiscal year 18 for this update. We only spent about $13,000, and rather than roll that unspent portion forward, what we only budgeted for was the additional amount in 2019, assuming we spent the $75,000 in 18. Similarly, though, we didn't budget the full amount of grant revenue that's available, so making that revision, the net impact to the general fund is about an additional $30,000.
Okay.
Or 35. So again, internal service operating expenditures, salaries and benefits are in line with where we were at this time last year, slightly down, and that's attributed to vacant positions. The main area where you're going to see a difference between where we were this time last year and this year deals with maintenance and operations, and that's specifically with the insurance fund. So again, when we put together the estimate, we are using our estimated liability insurance costs that Parsac provided us. The actual number ended up being slightly higher than what was originally estimated. However, what we did not anticipate is that for fiscal year 17-18, our insurance costs were based on a projected payroll of $5 million. I think I had mentioned last time in the budget update that the reason for the significant increase in our insurance costs between 18 and 19 was due to the revised payroll estimate of closer to $6.5 million. Parsac does an annual audit of what our actual payroll is to what we represented or estimated our payroll to be. And so in December of 2018, we received an invoice to true up the fiscal year 18 insurance costs to what they should have been had we reported a more accurate estimate for our payroll costs. Moving on to harbor revenues, again, what I tried to do is compare where we were at this time last year to where we are currently, or as of December 31st. Again, revenues are more or less in line with what our estimates are and where we were this time last year. When we came together and created our estimates for revenues, we anticipated revenues to be relatively flat from fiscal year 18, considering fiscal year 18 revenues were, I believe, the highest harbor revenues on record. For a couple of the accounts in harbor, we're slightly below, particularly in admissions tax, but I believe that can be made up considering I think we were a little conservative in our cruise ship wharfage. So more or less, I think where we're going to end up with our harbor revenues is pretty close to where we estimated. Similarly with expenditures, across the three major categories, we're in line with where we were at this time last year.
So I'm sorry to interrupt. The admissions, that's like parasail and those kind of folks?
Yes. So in any ticketed activity, and just to kind of take a step back, the city also publishes a monthly tourism-driven revenue report that includes admissions tax as a category, but it doesn't separate out mainland admissions tax, if you will, which goes to the general fund, and harbor admissions. And just in general, what I've seen is while the general fund's admission tax have been increasing slightly, I have seen a recent drop in admissions tax related to the harbor.
So if I was booking something from the island company, if I didn't walk up to a booth, can I, like that kind of thing, I buy something online, Oli?
Regardless of where it's
credit cards or something?
Where it was purchased shouldn't impact. If there's a ticketed activity that's going on in the harbor, it should be subject to the admissions tax. So what this would indicate to me is that either business is down for those services that are subject to the admissions tax, or this may be an area we might want to look into if we're going to do an audit of the ad tax.
Are you sure you're not talking about the harbor use fee?
I want to make
that we need to clarify that because admissions tax is not the harbor use.
Harbor use fee is anything that has to do with the ocean. So the Parasail pays a harbor use fee, which is 7%. 4% of that 7% is the admissions tax.
Got it.
But when we reference just admissions tax, that's strictly land-based things. So like a tour to the interior or mopeds or.
That's a good point, and what we might need to look into, because our harbor use fee is actually up, so it may be an issue just with where we're allocating. So I can go back and I'll take a look at that. But overall, harbor revenues look to be about where we estimated they would be.
Yeah.
Again, nothing really stood out as far as harbor expenditures across any of the three categories. They're more or less in line with where we expected them to be. Labor or salaries and benefits is down considerably, and I believe that's attributed to the sick and vacation payouts that occurred in fiscal year 18, and while there are some in 19, it's considerably less. So lastly, for the other enterprise funds, I've consolidated these into just revenues and expenditures, and I'll go into them in more detail. Expenditures in the sewer, saltwater, solid waste are in line with where we estimated. Again, these are operating expenditures and not capital expenditures aren't included in this estimate or in this chart. Revenues are going to be slightly down from where we were at this time last year, and I believe that's attributed to handbills that were mailed out this year later than we had in prior years. So there are certain assessments that aren't done through the county where we manually create the invoice and invoice those businesses or individuals, and those went out, I believe, later this year than they had in prior years, and I believe that's why the revenues in the sewer, saltwater, solid waste are slightly below where we were this time last year. With Avalon Transit, we also underestimated what the expenditures would be for contractual services. So what I want to do is kind of go over, just real briefly, what the two local transportation funds are, what services are covered under those funds, and what the cost is to the city for that. So the first fund I'm going to talk about is the Local Transportation Fund. And what that fund is that is our local return revenues that the city receives, Prop A, Prop C, Measure M, Measure R, as well as the subsidy we receive for the cross-channel carrier of $650,000. Eligible expenditures we book to that account up to the amount of the revenues we receive. So the overall impact in that account should be zero in that the revenues and expenditures match. Any expenditures in excess in those areas for local transportation or cross-channel end up getting booked in the Avalon Transit Fund. So using fiscal year 18 as an example, we spent approximately $700,000 for the cross-channel subsidy, and we received about $650,000 reimbursed. We are actively trying to get them to we're requesting from the county additional funds for the subsidy, but one of the best ways we can get those additional funds is by demonstrating there's an actual need for them. And so it is a bit of a catch-22 in that in order to make the argument that we do need additional funds, we do have to spend those funds to show the need to the county. But we did spend about $50,000 more in the cross-channel subsidy than what was covered by the county, which ultimately the general fund picks up as part of the Avalon Transit Fund. The additional expenditures that come out of that fund is the taxi book subsidy. So we spend approximately $90,000 a year on the taxi book subsidy, and we receive about $30,000 in revenues to offset that. So there's a net cost to the city of approximately $60,000 for the taxi book subsidy program, as well as the Transportation Concepts contract to the amount that it's not covered by local return funds, which is approximately $80,000. Those expenditures fall in this contractual services account. That $80,000 is covered or offset by the fare box revenues we do receive in the transit fund. But again, those expenditures end up getting booked to this contractual services account. Lastly, we do have some other operating costs in the Avalon Transit. A quarter of one personnel's time is booked to this account. And the reason for that is the NTD requires that there is someone to manage a transit program, and how you demonstrate to them that there's someone to manage a transit program is by having labor-related expenditures. And so we do have some employee time being booked to the transit account. In addition to that, any training or travel relating to transit goes there, as well as insurance costs for the transportation, as well as I believe utilities or fuel also comes into that factor as well. So what ends up happening, or what it looks like has happened the last 2 years, is transit ultimately costs the city, after factoring the fare revenues, after factoring the local return funds we receive, there still is a net cost to the city of approximately $200,000. And the estimate we used when we built the budget really didn't account for all these different services that I'm outlining. Again, when we put together the estimates, we try to use historical data to see what we would expect the activity. And because of changes to fund structures, it made it particularly difficult to do for the Avalon Transit. Again, just as it was brought up in prior budget discussions, just an update of our city attorney retainer and our spend as of December 31st, which is more or less in line with prior year. Real quick, I don't want to get too into the weeds on capital projects, but I did want to just provide a brief update of what we've spent on the larger projects, the ones with a budgeted expenditure of greater than $50,000. I'm sure Dan can speak to it more, but based on budget activity, it looks like we're wrapping up the Joe Machado Field and city playground improvements based on our spend. The Pebbly Beach Road revetment, we're expecting more activity in the second half of this fiscal year, and then even more so in the first half of the next fiscal year. We hope to start on the Beacon Chairlift soon, as well as the Whitley expansion project. Again, with sewer saltwater, the amount there is right now what's assigned to the capital expenditure account in the sewer. I haven't provided a breakdown of what it is for, but we have not started the centrifuge process, and again, Bob can speak to it better than I. We're waiting on results from an energy audit to make sure we make the correct selection when we get to that point. Again, additional sewer-related expenditures from last week's incident wouldn't be factored here. This is as of December 31st. And then lastly, in the harbor, again, you can see that the fuel dock project closeout has been completed. But other than that, most of the capital expenditure that was in the 18 budget as of December 31st has not impacted right now our funds. Particularly with the mole phase 1, we expect to see significant expenditures during the second half of this fiscal year, as well as some of the other projects. So the last slide here is just a summary of what I had discussed and the proposed amendments to the budget to account for those things. And then just to call out the last slide, since I hadn't spoke to it before. Previously, I did not include any budgeted transfers to the special revenue funds. Since we had rolled those up into the general fund, the net impact of our combined general fund would have been 0, because you would have had transfers to a general fund and then transfers back to a general fund. However, I think it's more appropriate to split those out, and in doing so, the Community Development Block Grant Fund, as well as the Traffic Control and Safety Fund. Those are both funds that we receive special revenues that have to be spent on specific purposes. Both of those end up with a negative fund balance that would need to be offset by general fund revenues that previously weren't included in the adopted budget. Again, this is the last slide with the proposed amendments using the new beginning balance for fiscal year 19, where those proposed amendments would bring us to, assuming there were other expenditures and revenues come in with budget and estimates. I know that's a lot of information, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Council?
Oh my gosh. I would like to get additional information on the revised estimate, increased sewer fund operating expenditures by $240,000.
So that is going back, I believe, to
Page 7.
The 2018 estimates?
17-18 estimates, yeah.
So when we put the estimated expenditures together back in April and May, there was a significant number of expenditures that ultimately weren't paid until July or August that we didn't factor into our estimate. And then when those expenditures did occur, we didn't go back and revise the estimate to that account to reflect those payments that were made in July and August. So the budgeted amount was approximately $900,000, but the activity, particularly for the ESG, we estimated would be $720,000, and that was based on the amount of spend we had when we put together those estimates. We didn't anticipate the outstanding bills that ultimately were paid in July and August, and then when we presented the budget in October, we didn't go back and revise that estimate based on the activity that had occurred.
So let me ask you a question then. When it's generally speaking, it's Public Works that brings us, we need to do this right now, we need these funds to do this fix or this something, and that will, and generally we say, is that budgeted or unbudgeted expenses? If it's unbudgeted expenses and we approve it, doesn't that automatically count as changing the budget at that time? Am I saying that the right way? Because in my head, I know what I'm saying.
But I'm not sure what the right answer is, if I'm perfectly honest. And I don't think this scenario is that situation. Mm-hmm. This is where we had budgeted to spend $900,000 in an account based on a contract. Our activity at the time we made the estimate was significantly less than that budgeted amount. And so when we estimated what we thought the activity would be for the year, we ended up estimating it coming in below budget, when really it came in at the budget, but more than what we had estimated it to be. When there is a project that comes to council and there is a fiscal impact, then yes, that would lead to a revision to the budget if that's the direction that council provides.
And then my other comment would be, I think we need to have a conversation at the council level about the transit in town.
Yes.
I think we are grossly underestimating what we could be doing with that. I don't think we're advertising it, and I think it's important that we bring that back for a further discussion later.
Huge discussion.
Yeah. And
I was going to get with her tomorrow on numbers, but I'll have her give you those numbers, the ridership numbers as well.
Yes,
she was
please.
going to explain them to me because, I mean,
so I'm requesting that we authorize staff to bring back the Avalon Transit at a further meeting.
Yeah, because my
discussion.
How long is the contract with Transportation Concept?
Just up to for 2 years.
Tonight was.
We extended it tonight for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
For 2 years until 2021?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay.
And again, specific, and this is probably a question or a discussion down the road, is the Transportation Concept contract is largely offset by the local return funds we do receive. Again, those funds are restricted in their purpose, but they can be used for transportation services in general. But the large portion of their contract is paid for using the local return funds.
So then we have the other contract with Catalina Transportation.
Right.
Which is where the taxi voucher program
Yes.
is.
Matt, didn't we have for some reason, it's in my head that we had some, like an unexpected 200,000 in revenue to the Housing Authority?
So that won't, we are going to receive more funds to the Housing Authority. What that was is there is a loan between the successor agency and the Housing Authority, and that loan's eligible for interest, which previously wasn't considered.
Right.
That interest that we'd be eligible to receive we won't see it until fiscal year 2020 or 2021.
Oh, it's in a subsequent ROPS.
It's in a subsequent ROPS.
Okay.
So we will receive those additional funds, but it won't be in this budgeted year.
So I'm just looking because it says here that we've had 411,000 in operating expenditures out of the Housing Authority, and I'm trying to figure out what
We haven't had those. That is what we have currently budgeted. So 300,000 of that is for the rental assistant program. Again, unless I knew an activity wasn't going to occur anymore, I left what our original budget amount was. And so I think that's going to be the vast majority of what that is.
Got it. Okay. Cool. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
We have received the report.
I guess the only other thing would be with regards to the proposed amendments. And again, we can bring this back at a later meeting as well, if you would like additional time, but.
I'm good with it.
Because nobody really lost anything. It's not like they said, Dan, we just took $50,000 out of your budget, or you didn't do any of that stuff.
I mean, I hate to look at it this way, but in some ways our expenditures were higher than we estimated, but in some ways we have more funds available than we thought.
I'll make a motion to receive the report and authorize the following proposed budget amendments A through E.
I'll second.
Okay, further comments? Call for the vote.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All
Thank
ayes,
you.
one absent, Hernandez.
Can we have 2 minutes?
No.
Can we?
How long is your report?
We really don't have a report.
We don't have a report.
We don't have a report.
Oh, no,
okay.
the report is, as it's filed,
Right.
to remove us from stage 1.
Oh, that is true.
Oh, that. Oh, the Edison thing. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
And so,
Do you want to talk about that then?
as soon as you start listening to a lot of hammers pounding nails.
Well, and that, okay, so they do that, okay, so they do that, but do we have a discussion about wanting our community to be kind of stage one friendly? I mean, I think, and I don't know how we have that conversation or what we can do or make a proclamation or whatever to say it really is important for us to continue the way we have been, number one. And number two, I think the Planning Commission should be very cautious moving forward because there are a lot of projects on the list. And if we end up with a whole bunch of growth and then end up in this situation in 3 or 4 years without Edison dealing with the year-round sustainability issue, we're screwed again. We just screw in more people. So I think that really needs to be watched internally and however else we need to do that because...
And we've also seen a reduction in the amount of acreage feet the reservoir holds. So what we originally thought was a full reservoir is now...
Instead of 1,100 and something.
Right. So I think it's critical that we take that into consideration as well.
We still have to hold Edison feet to the fire to keep the RO working. We've just got an RO report that said plant number 1 didn't produce any water last month, and a couple days plant number 2 was in the 16,000 gallon range. So.
I mean, not being able to dictate to them is kind of frustrating. Okay.
Are we taking a 1 minute, 2 minute break?
Well, what are we doing next?
We have the housing.
The presentation on the housing law.
Oh, well, that's what I was asking.
If you want it.
Can we take a 2 minute quick?
Sure.
2 minutes.
I got 2 minutes.
Is it ever too late to talk after? We are on. Okay, we're back. Okay, council, really quick before Elizabeth does this, is it okay if I bring back something that during the council reports?
Yes, I think that would be fine.
Okay, thank you. I've gotten from 2 Vaughn's employees and a couple of people from the community have said that the city of Avalon is keeping Vaughn's from hiring new employees. So we're looking like the bad guys because they're understaffed and they're working a lot of overtime. And I think somehow we need to reach out to Vaughn's, or we need to clarify what that misunderstanding is, because I do believe it has to do with the inclusionary housing issue that they're concerned with moving forward, and they're making us look like the bad guys. And I don't appreciate that. So I don't know what we do, or maybe a reach out to Vaughn's. Maybe they can set their employees straight and tell them really what's going on.
Okay.
Okay, that's all. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
All right, so item 14 on your agenda, there had been we've discussed a lot about housing in the past few months, 6 months or so, and there had been a request for a little bit of an update on some of the new housing laws. So I'm going to go through them relatively quickly. There have been hundreds, literally hundreds, introduced in the past 2 to 3 years. 15 of them were ultimately signed in 2017. Additionally, in 2018, we've had a few more signed, and there are more pending in 2019. There are some fairly standard themes in these bills, primarily focused on eroding your local control and incentivizing the building of housing. Some of them we've talked about and addressed: ADUs, density bonus. You did your second readings of your ordinances tonight. Inclusionary housing is going to the Planning Commission next week, I think, Amanda, something like that, or tomorrow maybe. Your first whack at your revised inclusionary housing ordinance is going to the Planning Commission tomorrow. So you've addressed many things, but there are still many other changes in law out there. So I'm going to run through it pretty quickly. Some of them apply directly to you, some of them don't. If you have any questions or if you want to talk along the way, let me know. So the first couple of ones that I'm going to talk about address regional housing needs assessment. So you get your RHNA number. AB 1771 is really not directed at you. It's directed at the COG at SCAG, who sets your RHNA number. And it changes sort of the way they do their methodology and adds some additional objectives to increase access to fair housing for low-income residents. And it asks them to look at some new information related to the number of low-wage jobs within the jurisdiction and how many housing units within the jurisdiction are available or affordable to low-wage workers. And it adds and meaningful actions that overcome patterns of segregation and foster inclusiveness communities. So they're just expanding what the SCAG needs to look at as they set your RHNA number. So it doesn't have a direct impact on us. The next one is SB 828. This is also another one directed at SCAG or the Council of Governments, depending on what direction or what jurisdiction you live in. And it addresses the RHNA numbers and the methodology of how it's set. So one of the things it does is it prohibits the prior underproduction of housing in a city or a county from the previous cycle being used as a justification to reduce your number. So in the past, if you had a big number, you didn't meet it, people would go in and lobby for their RHNA number to be lower because they hadn't met it previously. That's not going to work anymore.
Oh, yeah.
So, but like I said, this one's really directed more at SCAG or the other councils of governments and not directly impacting us. AB 686. This is getting more into, the next couple of bills we're going to talk about are really related to our housing element. So they're sort of forward thinking as we come up on our next housing element cycle. This one added a requirement that you add an assessment to your fair housing, an assessment of, your fair housing related programs and activities for your next housing element cycle. So you're going to look at fair housing enforcement, outreach, analysis of some federal, state, and local data, and then for us, the result will be that we're going to talk about the ADU ordinance, the density bonus ordinance, the inclusionary housing zoning ordinance that we're hopefully going to be adopting between now and then. And then we're also going to be looking over the next few months at your municipal code for any other changes that we can make that will address these issues. There's some language in your municipal code that's pretty old and really not reflective of current law and your current approach to housing. So we're going to go through, in addition to the ones that we've already addressed, and pull those things out for you over the next few months. So you'll have a number of things to add to your housing element when this topic comes up.
So when you talk about fair housing enforcement and outreach and whatever, what about, like we're talking about rental inspection programs and things like that. This isn't addressing anything like that we need to, that is an issue in the city big time, but that's not anything, when they talk about fair housing enforcement and outreach, that's not anything like that.
It may be something that we address in that section also, if it's appropriate. We'll meet with staff, and your consultants will come in and meet with staff and go through all of the programs that you have out there that, ones I'm not aware of.
Okay.
And we'll try and address all of those to make the best case that we are addressing these issues in the city.
Okay.
All right, the next one is AB 1397. All right, so one of the big issues that everybody has in their housing element is identifying enough sites to build your housing requirement. So under existing law, you had to have your inventory of land suitable for residential development. This bill has added some more meat to that, shall we say? And you'll see I've underlined in the first one, it's really the key one. So you now have to have your inventory be of land that's available for residential development. And in addition, it has to be suitable for residential development, and it has to have realistic and demonstrated potential for development. So this is getting at the fact that many jurisdictions over the years have identified the side of a hill as, and really we all know nobody's going to build on that side of the hill for a place for their low-income housing. So the state's actively trying.
Well, I can't agree with what you're saying, because we went around that a couple years ago about put it on this side of this hill over here.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So, a lot of jurisdictions, because they don't have the space, they're built out, and they're really up against a hard spot trying to find spaces. They have identified in the past spaces that may not be completely realistic for development. So one of the goals of this bill is to try and get you around that.
So you go to a town like Avalon and you look around and you go, okay, all we have is hillsides. Number one, most of them are not available to us. So we sit here and say, we're at a deadlock. But then you've got those RHNA numbers that say we have to. So how do we combat that, or what's our options?
Yeah, really great question. I don't have an answer for that one.
Okay.
I wish I did. We will go through parcel by parcel and see what we can identify and try and come up with other programs to help us meet those goals. But it's going to be a real issue not only for Avalon, but there's a lot of cities, particularly in Southern California, that are built out.
Right.
And, they're getting these RHNA numbers, and now these laws are coming into effect that are making it harder for us to meet it on paper, trying to find substantive solutions. And so we're going to have to work on that over the next few years.
Okay.
All right. So what do we have to AB 879. This increases or changes some of the requirements for your annual progress report and your fee studies. So as you know, every year you submit to HCD, or we're supposed to submit to HCD an annual progress report. This will require us to update the housing element and that report to provide additional data on local implementation, project approvals, processing timeframes, things like that. They're looking for more real-time data to show what efforts we are making to address the housing issues and how we're progressing. This one, when the housing laws were addressed in 2017, 2018, this one did not get a lot of play in the press. You didn't hear much about it. It overlaps a lot with SB 35, which is the one most people have heard about.
So you end up doing 2 reports?
One report, they just had the same requirements.
Oh, okay.
SB 166, this is kind of a big one. It is the no net loss requirement. And so this one has become very problematic for many jurisdictions. So back in the old day, we would list in our housing inventory list, our land list, every site we had, and we would say that it would hold 30 acres to the unit, or 30 units to the acre, or whatever. The problem with this is now this law says that if that's what you identified, if you build less than that on there, you have to identify a new site right now.
Oh my God.
Whereas in the old day, we would not have to identify a new site until we got to the next housing element cycle. So if you get in a project tomorrow on a site that we've identified and it comes in and we had said we were going to put 200 units on that site and they're proposing, 100 units and they're not low income, we need to replace that site. The law is problematic in that it says that we have to replace it. I think we have 180 days to identify this new site. It does, but we can't deny a project. So developer A comes in, says, I want to use this site and only put half of it on it what you said. We can't deny their project because it's causing us this problem.
Right.
So a number of cities are struggling with this one.
And we can't go back and say, wait a minute, these are really silly laws.
No.
Unless you
Missed
get
that opportunity.
What's that?
Missed that opportunity.
Okay, unless we find somebody new in the future to carry something out.
Now, you can work with the league or your
Right.
lobbyists if you want to propose some legislative changes.
Right.
Identify some of these issues as problematic for us in other jurisdictions.
I mean, is there any jurisdiction in all of California that would say, no problem, this is great?
Not that I know of.
No. Yeah, okay.
No. And as we've all seen with Governor Newsom and, his State of the State address and, his opening remarks when he was sworn into office, housing is really on his mind.
Well, it is, it's on all of our minds,
all of ours,
but
yeah.
don't make it difficult for us, more difficult. Okay.
So more information on no net loss. So what we would have to do if a project came in is we would have to identify and make available a new site, which is challenging. The one good thing, I guess, in here is they added some somewhat confusing CEQA language. So it says that you don't have to CEQA the new site, but you can't do your general plan amendment without CEQA. So it's a little confusing. We're not sure how that one's going to play out. They were attempting, I believe, one of the complaints you hear a lot is that CEQA causes so much delay and trouble for housing projects that it really adds cost and is an impediment. I think this was an attempt to facilitate that, to allow these projects to move forward and new sites to be developed without having the delay associated with CEQA. But the language is not entirely clear, and it's led to some confusion throughout the state. So we're hoping we'll get some legislative relief on that one so we're clear as to how we can implement it and move forward. SB 35 is the big one from last year. And this requires a whole new streamlined ministerial approval process for qualifying residential developments in cities that have failed to meet their respective regional housing need targets in a given year. Avalon is on the naughty list because we haven't built enough units. So we are subject to SB 35. But, I'm sorry?
Well, I mean, where could we build them?
Yeah,
and that's the part that I find difficult to try to explain or understand, is that the city doesn't own any land that doesn't have City Hall or the fire department on it. So how are we supposed to?
So Avalon's in a really unique position because you don't own any land. You are basically built out. Most of your land is owned by one property owner. So any project that comes in has to go through that property owner, which is not to say or imply that it's the island company's fault. It's just sort of the reality of our facts.
But they're not going to want the land use restrictions.
Exactly. So, it's a legitimate concern how we address this, particularly in Avalon situation. I'm not sure I have great answers for you. It's what we're going to work on as we look at your housing element over the next few years of ways to deal with this. We might want to think about some Avalon-specific legislation. Those are all possibilities. SB 35 is unique for a couple of reasons as it relates to you. So you're on the list that qualifies for this streamlined process. What we have found is that although SB 35 imposes this streamlined process, it doesn't actually work very well. If you utilize the streamlined process, for example, you have to build a prevailing wage. Well, most developers don't want to do that because it increased costs.
Right.
So there are a number of problems with with SB 35. What I have not figured out yet, and actually Amanda and I were talking about this a minute ago, is so technically we're on the list where SB 35 applies to us, but it also says that SB 35 projects can't be located in 11 sensitive protected areas or zones, including the coastal zone. Well, we are entirely within the coastal zone. So it's not clear to me exactly how SB 35 would ever apply to us. So we are technically on the list, subject to streamlining, but our entire jurisdiction falls within the coastal zone. So I don't believe it could be applied to Avalon.
Right, yeah.
So those are sort of the big laws surrounding development and housing element and those sorts of issues. Did I skip one?
You did.
Yeah, you did.
78.
Yeah.
It doesn't match. AB 678, Housing Accountability Act amendments. So I'm going to say 35 years ago or so, the Housing Accountability Act was passed, and it's sort of the anti-NIMBY law. It stops cities from disapproving or conditioning of projects because we don't want them in our backyard.
Right.
This amendment, or the series of amendments, added some additional requirements or findings and things. The first thing it did is it used to be that you couldn't disapprove a project or condition a project and render it infeasible unless you made certain findings, and those had to be based on substantial evidence. They have now increased that standard from substantial evidence to a preponderance of the evidence. So you have to sort of hit a higher bar before you can deny a project. This also authorizes the local agency to disapprove or condition a project for being inconsistent with the jurisdiction zoning ordinance or the general plan. This now says you can't change your zoning ordinance or general plan after the project's been submitted. So you can't find out about a project and then go, oh wait, new rules, to try and get around it. So it's just doing some things like that. It also puts some requirements on us to respond to applicants in a certain time frame. If we fail to, then the project's deemed consistent, and we lose our chance to object to it. And then it also imposes, if we were to get a challenge under this law, it now imposes attorney fees upon us. So I know, I've just been so full of good news for you guys
I mean, so
today.
far, nothing, right? Oh, maybe AB 73 might be a little better.
Well, AB 73 is interesting. AB 73 is meant to spur development of housing on infill sites near public transportation. So, not exactly sure it works for us in Avalon, but in other jurisdictions, that allows the city to create the sustainability district to create a streamlined process for approving developments that meet a series of criteria. And basically what it does is it has the city identify certain sites or certain areas and do the environmental and the planning work for the site. So make sure that it's zoned for it and that you've done the CEQA for a development of a certain amount of size. And then the developer gets to come and enjoy sort of an expedited processing to help get it through. Because this is sort of a new and novel approach, this also comes with some HCD oversight and monitoring. We are allowed to add our own design review standards and some limitations like that, but we can't do anything that would make it infeasible for the project to be built.
Elizabeth, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
If the city wanted to do an HSD, where we picked out some of the sites where we thought we might be able to negotiate housing, could the city use our low mod housing money to do the preliminary CEQA work?
Probably, yes. We haven't thought about it, but we could certainly look at it.
My recollection is when we were working with CNC on that project up in Tremont, part of the upfront cost was the CEQA work that had to be done, and I guess in that instance we would have, some of our low mod money as it was going into that project would have offset that cost. But I was just wondering if we went through this, if we wanted to go through this process, could we use that money on that preliminary work?
I'm going to say yes, I believe so. We'd have to look at it, look at the law, but your low mod money is designed to be used to facilitate the development of low and moderate income housing. So if that's what this was going to accomplish, it is likely a valid expense.
Okay. And we probably wouldn't want to spend it unless we had some kind of contractual right to the property.
Right.
Okay.
Good question. Thank you.
The other interesting thing about HSDs is the law authorizes a zoning incentive payment to the city to help offset some of the costs of doing this. So that's the upside. The downside is that no money's been budgeted for that. So
Great.
I'm full of good news tonight. Moving on, AB 2162, supportive housing. So, sorry, this one's really tiny. So this has to do with transitional housing and supportive housing, as residential uses, and a limitation on sort of what restrictions can be placed on those. This bill was primarily non-substantive and just had some cleanup language in it to clarify if the supporting housing is allowed by right, it must meet certain criteria. I don't think it's really an issue for Avalon.
So talk to me, prohibits the local government from imposing any minimum parking requirements for units occupied by supportive housing residents if the development is located within a half mile of public transit?
Correct.
What does that mean?
So
parking restrictions.
If you're building transitional or supportive housing,
Right.
and it's within a half mile of a transit stop.
Which ours is.
Right, we would be limited on the parking requirements that we could impose.
We can't impose minimum parking.
Correct.
We just changed the route of the bus.
Yeah, where, yeah. Well, see, that's not good for us.
Matt, are you building any?
But if we do, like if we wanted to continue to build on East Whitley, for example, at our East Whitley property, if we built 4 units or whatever, we'd have to.
Yeah, but it has to be supportive housing.
Supportive housing.
Transit, it's not just low mod housing, it's supportive housing, so it has to provide services, like specified services for the mentally ill.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
people
sorry.
with disability, yes.
Oh, I see, I'm sorry.
It's more than just low mod, it's
I didn't-
a particular type of low
Okay.
mod supportive housing.
Okay, I didn't know what supportive meant.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, the next one, AB 1521. Again, it's not really an issue for us, I wouldn't think. This is a preservation notice law, and it just sets out additional noticing requirements. So if we have units that are going to lose their affordability covenants, their restrictions, and I think the ones we had that were close, we went away a year or two ago. I think everything else is going to be around for a while. But if the...
Did Tremont get extended?
I don't believe.
Oh.
Oh, did it? So, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. Oh, good, okay.
Okay.
Anyways, so if you did have ones that were coming off soon, there's additional, you have to provide 3 years' notice and some additional steps.
Wait a minute, when does UKIL come up?
86. So 35, 91,
So it should be
120.
45 years?
21.
Yeah.
Oh, so a couple of years.
So, anyways, so it adds new requirements related to the notice for tenants and others, and if someone makes an offer to purchase, there's some additional noticing requirements.
Okay.
AB 72, this one got quite a bit of notice in the press and all. It adds to HCD's authority. So back in the old day, HCD didn't really have a lot of teeth in what they could do if we weren't in compliance. Now they are, and I'll read it, empowered to review any action or failure to act by the city that it determines is inconsistent with the housing element, certain statutes, and basically the Housing Accountability Act. If they find that we are, they can issue written findings to the city about whether or not we're in compliance with housing authority law, and give us 30 days to fix it, or to respond and take any other action authorized. So the rub with this is there's no standard established for how HCD determines that the action or failure is not in substantial compliance, so there's no real guidelines. If HCD does find that we have violated particularly housing authority or housing element law, they have a variety of things that they can do to us, none of which are good. Jeez. So if they find that we have violated the Housing Accountability Act, the No Net Loss law, density bonus law, or prohibitions on discriminating against affordable housing, and if we have violated housing element law in general, there's no appeal process identified in the statute, so we'd have to go straight to court to disagree with them. And if we were found to have violated these things, they can decertify our housing element. The bad side of them decertifying our housing element is that a court can come in and order us to comply with whatever they're saying we didn't do. They can suspend our authority to make local land use decisions. The court can take that over. They can judicially approve proposed housing developments, so they can take that out of your hands. And then we're also liable for legal fees and costs occurred depending on who challenged us. And then just for fun, you also won't be eligible to get state funding. Great. So I would point you in the direction of the city of Encinitas. They are currently in this fight with the state, and we're all watching quite closely actually to see what's happened. They're under court order to bring their housing element into compliance. They have failed to do so. So we're going to see how this plays out. But there is pending litigation, and I believe they have been invited to a special meeting with the governor to talk about housing issues.
Wow.
So those sort of cover the bulk of the housing laws that have been adopted in 2017, 2018. Like I said, there's a boatload more that have been introduced this year, and we expect additional changes. But all of the ordinances that you've approved, your density bonus, your ADU, and the draft inclusionary housing ordinance, all of those were drafted with all of these in mind. So you're in compliance with all of the new stuff at this point, or will be once we get the inclusionary housing ordinance through.
Okay.
The last issue, not any new law that has come up, but was an issue that came up when we were talking generally last August about housing, was the issue of rent control. And so we just wanted to give you a little bit on rent control. So rent control is generally considered when a local housing vacancy rate is considered very low, which is 5% or lower. It's generally a tool for preventing landlords from taking advantage of the fact that, it's a landlord's market at that point. Rent control is generally established in two ways. It's either adopted through an ordinance by the city council, so it's on your own motion, or by a voter initiative. No matter who does it, it has to be established in a way that provides a landlord with the ability to earn a quote-unquote just and reasonable return.
So the vacancy rate, that's not the fact that we've just got a bunch of houses on the hill that nobody cares that they just come 2 weeks a year. So how do we get these numbers?
How do we know if
the
we're
vacancy
within
rate?
5%?
Generally, you'd have to go out and do a sampling. Probably your local real estate people could tell us where we were, give us a general idea.
Because you're not going to see one sign on a door that says for rent. I mean, those definitely don't occur.
Right.
So
This isn't a legal requirement, you're just indicating that, in general, that's
generally
what
this is where you're at.
consider
Right.
adopting.
And I'm just saying, how do we know that we're within that 5% or lower?
There's only one unit on the post office bulletin board.
Yeah, when people post on
Right.
Facebook.
So if organized by local residents placing a rent control initiative on the ballot, what does that need signature-wise? Is that or what does that need to?
It's probably like that initiative that Mark did.
It's like a 2/3 vote?
No.
When it's a tax, right?
Right. 2/3 is only, the supermajorities are only for taxes.
So just a
only for
majority.
taxes?
Yeah, this would
Okay.
be the majority.
Would be.
Okay.
So I think the petition is 10% of the registered voters.
Right.
I'm sorry, that's part of what I was asking, yes.
180.
And what would it need to pass? 51%?
Right.
Would be the answer. Okay.
50 plus 1.
50.1.
50 plus 1.
50%
Plus one
vote.
Okay, got it.
Generally, rent control can only be applied to duplexes, multifamily and mobile home spaces. There's a whole additional slew of laws regarding mobile homes. So
I don't think we have any of those, but we certainly have almost every option of duplex, multifamily, and whatever else. So you need a 10% voter signature for a ballot initiative. Is that? Okay.
And like I said, generally, it can only be duplexes, multifamily, and mobile home spaces. There are a few exceptions where it can be applied to a single-family home. And
So, but if we have no money in our housing thing, it's all a moot point, right? How can they get down on us for not having sites, or if we have no money? And no way to entice somebody?
so there are a number of state programs. They're looking at there's additional legislation proposed to come up with additional funding sources. There are, I don't think you have an opportunity zone over here. There are a number of programs that are being introduced statewide. So opportunity zones. I think you guys looked at EIFDs at one point.
Not really very well.
But, yeah.
Because there was somebody that's saying we were eligible, and then we were hearing no, but we really are, based on the information I got, and I don't remember what it is, we really are one of those. But they said it's kind of a fight with the county.
Yes,
Because they've got
it's a
it.
fight with the
But I mean,
So for Avalon, I mean, we could go back and look at it. It was a previous city manager and
Right.
who was looking at, but from what I recall, one of the concerns with the EIFD is you do need the county to commit. To make it work. And the County of Los Angeles has put out some very stringent guidelines And based upon your situation, it didn't look like you satisfied the guidelines for the county to agree.
Oh,
I don't know
okay.
exactly what those were,
Right,
where
okay.
the disconnect was, but that's my
Mhm.
understanding of why it went away.
Okay.
You know, so the governor is looking at additional funding sources for housing at this point because everybody's in the same position because we did away with redevelopment, so we no longer have
Right.
a low moderate income
Right.
housing fund as a resource.
Hmm.
So that is my very uplifting description of the state of housing in California.
Let's get Scotty back here.
Well, we appreciate this very thorough presentation. Thank you.
And if you have more questions, I'm happy to come back and talk about any of them more specifically, or if there's, you know, anything else you want to know about, we're happy to update you as things change.
Okay, but again, if
Thank
we have
you.
no money, they can't come after us for not doing stuff if we have no money.
$4 million.
I know, but I think we should get rid of that as soon as we can. Buy whatever, do whatever. I mean, yeah, yeah. Okay.
I think we need to do
Closed session.
something with that money.
Yes. Okay, so now, closed session?
Oh, closed session. Sorry, my bad. So we're going to go into closed session now for a conference with legal counsel regarding the initiation of litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, subparagraph D4, one case. And we're going to go into, are we doing this one?
Yes, we are.
And conference with labor negotiators, the agency designated representative being the city manager Denise Ratty, regarding employee organizations, Avalon Harbor Employee Association, Municipal Employee Association, International Association of Firefighters, Local 2295, unrepresented confidential employees and management.
Thank you. Good night, Tony.
Good night, Tony.
Good night, Tony.
And we're back from closed session. Legal counsel?
We have no reportable action.
Thank you. Good night. Good night.
Good night.
All right.